Chapter 190. The next morning, when Lin woke up, he had a terrible headache and felt uncomfortable all over, which was the sequela of drinking too much. Taking a deep breath, he operated his cultivation. The surging gang qi surged, dispelling all the discomfort in his body in an instant. Only then did Lin feel refreshed. Then, he unexpectedly found that he had returned to old Mo's warehouse in a daze. How dare you compete with others in drinking when you can't hold your liquor? Young man came over with a cup of tea and handed it to Lin with a contemptuous look. Lin smiled bitterly and drank up the tea. Then he said, "Sister man, did you bring me back last night?" Young man nodded and stared at Lin Sun with her beautiful eyes sparkling. She said, "Although you can't hold your liquor well, you did a good job in breaking through yesterday. Chief Shu told me that you have condensed the first-grade pond of spiritual power, Eye of Storm. You deserve to be my good brother. Well done." She pinched Lin's cheek intimately and smiled proudly, saying, "Do you know that you helped me vent my anger? Those guys who thought you didn't have enough foundation were all shocked as if they saw a ghost when they knew you had condensed the pond of spiritual power." "Ha!" Lin Sun said with a wry smile. "Sister man, are you betting with others again?" Young man sighed regretfully. "I wanted to bet, but those guys were all scared out of their wits by the last bet. How dare they bet with me again?" Lin was speechless. Young man suddenly asked, "When are you going to leave?" This question stunned Lin Sun, and then he suddenly remembered that the assessment of Bloodthirsty Camp had ended and all the trainees had broken through the realm. It was time to leave. "What about Shi Yu and Ning Meng?" Lin asked. "Early this morning, their families sent people to pick them up," young man said casually. Lin Sun immediately understood why these guys wanted to compete with him in drinking last night. It turned out that they knew they would leave today inexplicably. Lin Sun sighed. He didn't know when they would see each other again. The feeling of parting was really disappointing. Perhaps it was precisely because they didn't want to put on an act when they parted that they directly left without saying goodbye. "Yo, you're already sentimental at such a young age? Don't worry, as long as you're both in the Empire, you'll meet again sooner or later," young man teased. Lin Sun nodded and asked, "So, it's time for me to leave?" Young man said with slight surprise, "Why? Are you reluctant to leave? I forgot to tell you that except for you, other trainees in the Bloodthirsty Camp have already left before this morning." Lin Sun was stunned. He finally realized that it was time to put an end to his one-year life in the Bloodthirsty Camp. "Are you reluctant to part with me?" "Yes." But for Lin Sun, when he was sure that he was going to leave, he suddenly found that he didn't know where to go in such a big world. Young man seemed to notice something wrong with Lin's mood, so she patted him on the shoulder and said, "The Bloodthirsty Camp is too closed and isolated from the outside world. If you want to make greater achievements in cultivation in the future, you must leave here." Lin Sun smiled bitterly. "Sister young man, are you driving me away?" Young man looked surprisingly calm at this moment. Her sexy and beautiful face was no longer charming, which added a kind of solemnity to her. She stared at Lin Sun and said, "Little bastard, you really have to go. You have many secrets and many things that I don't know about. I know that you must have a lot of things to do, so I won't ask you to stay even if I'm reluctant to leave you." These simple words shocked Lin Sun. He stared at young man for a long time, and suddenly opened his arms with a smile and took the initiative to hug young man for the first time. "Sister young man, remember what I said that night. If you get into trouble in the future, you must tell me." After saying that, Lin Sun turned around and strode out of old Mo's warehouse. The teenager's back seemed extremely firm and straight at this moment, like a spear that had been thrust out, and he never looked back. Young man stared at him leaving, and her beautiful eyes were covered with a layer of mist. This damned little bastard! The camp was quiet, empty and quiet. There was no longer the hustle and bustle of the past. Walking alone, Lin Sun thought of his purpose of crossing the mountains to come to Xiao Empire. He thought of Master Lu, who went missing when the mine prison was destroyed. He thought of summer solstice. He also thought of old Mo, who was taken away to protect him. As young man said, there were too many things that Lin Sun couldn't let go. Only by leaving could he really solve these things. Shu Sanqi appeared in front of Lin Sun and handed him a storage ring. This is the ring you brought at that time. The original thing belongs to you. Lin Sun took it and asked, Drill Master Shu, in fact, I came to Bloodthirsty Camp for... Before he could finish his words, Shu Sanqi interrupted him. Someone will personally answer your doubts later. You don't have to tell me anymore. Lin Sun was stunned and confused. Soon, Lin Sun vaguely guessed the answer. A shabby old treasure ship came from the distant sky with a harsh roar, swaying as if it was drunk. The treasure ship was so familiar. It was the shabby treasure ship that sent Lin Sun, Ning Meng, and Sure Yu here 1 year ago. Lin Sun still remembered that the driver of the treasure ship was a bearded middle-aged man named Shu Jin. They are here to pick you up. Shu Sanqi stared at the shabby treasure ship, and a strange expression appeared on his rock-hard, cold face. Boom! The treasure ship shook violently as if it was gasping for breath, and then it landed outside the bloodthirsty camp. A big head stretched out of the treasure ship and shouted, Little guy, hurry up! I don't want to stay in this damn place. The big head was bearded, drowsy eyes, and red face. He showed a tough and bold momentum in his laziness. It was Shu Jin. Lin Sun nodded to Shu Jin and looked at Shu Sanqi, saying, Drill Master Shu, thank you for your care this year. I will bring old Mo back in the future. Shu Sanqi didn't say yes or no. He just took out a simple silver hairpin and handed it to Lin Sun. If you have a chance to enter the Forbidden City in the future, take this to Vulture House when you are in trouble. The owner of that place is my friend. When Lin Sun was about to refuse, he heard Shu Sanqi added, Young Ku may also be there. Don't you want to see your drill master again? Lin Sun didn't hesitate anymore and carefully accepted the hairpin. Shu Sanqi said seriously, Go ahead. Take care of yourself. Remember, don't forget the words cast in front of the gate of the bloodthirsty camp at any time. Xiao Flower was invincible because of the bloodthirsty, and the empire existed because of the war. Lin Sun silently read it in his heart, and then he bowed to Shu Sanqi with a rare serious attitude and left. Before leaving, he couldn't help looking back into the distance. He saw a young man standing with her arms crossed in front of her chest. Her long wine-red hair was flying in the wind, revealing a sexy and beautiful smiling face. Lin Sun waved his hand hard, smiled, and walked out of the gate of the bloodthirsty camp. Goodbye, little bastard. Young man murmured. Shu Sanqi stood alone, as straight as a spear, and stared at Lin Sun leaving in silence. This was the last trainee to leave the bloodthirsty camp in this session. No one knew whether there would be new trainees in the future. Boom! When Lin Sun just stepped on the treasure ship, Shu Jin, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, drove the treasure ship straight to the sky like a cannonball. Lin Sun staggered and almost lost his balance. He couldn't help but look a little gloomy. The feeling of loss caused by the departure became bad. Hey, little guy, don't be dissatisfied. There are not many people in the world who are qualified to sit on my treasure ship. Shu Jin laughed and gulped down the wine pot, not caring about Lin Sun's opinion at all. Lin Sun said, "Oh," and turned to walk into the cabin. When he walked in, he couldn't help but feel shocked, and all the distractions disappeared. An old man in a black court suit was sitting there at the moment. His silver hair was combed neatly, and his gentle old face was full of kindness. It was the old man from Heiyao Shrine. A year ago, in Donglin Town, the old man appeared with the mysterious Queen of Dark Night and took away Xia Ji with unquestionable will, but sent Lin Sun to the bloodthirsty camp. Now a year later, the old man appeared in front of him again, which made Lin Sun unable to keep calm. "Sit down," the old man said softly. Lin Sun suppressed all kinds of doubts in his heart and sat opposite to the old man. The old man stared at Lin Sun for a while and then said, "In 1 year, you broke through from the 6th level of martial realm to the human gang realm, won the first place in the quarterly assessment and the first place in the war zone assessment in the bloodthirsty camp, and finally condensed the first-grade pond of spiritual power known as the Eye of the Storm." The old man didn't hide his appreciation. "I have to admit that Miss and I both underestimated your potential a year ago. But there may be another possibility, that is, you had another lucky chance during the 1 year you were in the bloodthirsty camp." Lin Sun said, "Senior, you flatter me." He was a little surprised in his heart. It turned out that all his performance in the bloodthirsty camp had been known by the old man in front of him. "I promised that if you could get out of the bloodthirsty camp smoothly, I would tell you something about the little girl," the old man continued, but he suddenly stopped as if he had noticed something, and his eyebrows frowned imperceptibly. Almost at the same time, Shu Jin's rough voice came from the control room. "Oh my God, as soon as we left the bloodthirsty desert, someone came to stop us. It's so damn exciting." Boom! Before the voice died away, Lin Sun felt the treasure ship that was flying at full speed suddenly shook and stopped there in an instant. In the air far away from the treasure ship, a black battleship with a length of 300 meters, which was as huge as a sky fortress and overflowed with dazzling spirit light, appeared. Chapter 191. This was a standard mid-level battleship of the Empire, which was famous for its name Weiyang. It was 136 meters long and covered with spiritual tattoo formations. Like a fortress in the sky, it could accommodate 3,000 people. Weiyang battleship was equipped with 72 spiritual tattoo cannons called lava, which were powerful enough to kill a sea spirit realm practitioner in an instant. In the whole empire, only the big shots who really had the power could mobilize such a mid-level battleship. Damn it, I thought there would be another tough battle. I didn't expect that they are the henchmen of the Imperial Guards. Shu Jin seemed to recognize the origin of Weiyang battleship at a glance, and couldn't help cursing bitterly. Lin Sun frowned. The Imperial Guards? They were the elite force of the Forbidden City, and the most loyal army of the Imperial royal family. Why did such a special force appear here? Why did they intercept them? Boom! Under the control of Shu Jin, the shabby treasure ship landed on the ground. At the same time, Weiyang battleship in the distance also landed slowly. A middle-aged man in military uniform walked out of it and shouted, "Who is Lin Sun? Come out quickly!" His voice was like thunder, rumbling. "Oh, it turns out that you are looking for this boy. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant." Shu Jin whistled with a playful look. In the cabin, Lin Sun was stunned. Was he looking for him? "Since he is looking for you, you might as well go out and have a look." The old man smiled gently. Lin Sun nodded, opened the cabin door alone and walked out. "I'm Lin Sun. May I know who is looking for me?" Looking at the middle-aged man in military uniform standing under Weiyang battleship in the distance, Lin Sun felt a little strange. He didn't remember that he had anything to do with the Imperial Guards. "Ha ha ha, Lin Sun, we meet again." Suddenly, a burst of complacent laughter sounded. A teenager in a splendid robe walked down from Weiyang battleship. The teenager had long and narrow cheeks and slightly pale skin. It was Xin Wenbin. When he just entered the bloodthirsty camp, Xin Wenbin became hostile to Lin Sun. He regarded Lin Sun as his enemy and provoked Lin Sun again and again. But in the end, Xin Wenbin was unfortunately defeated and eliminated in the first monthly assessment. If Lin hadn't seen Xin Wenbin at this moment, he would have almost forgotten him. I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be Child Xian. Child Xian is waiting here. Are you here to see me off? Lin Sun said with a smile. He still remembered that Xin Wenbin's father was said to be a commander-in-chief of the Imperial Army in the Forbidden City. However, he didn't expect that Xin Wenbin could use a Weiyang battleship with his identity, so he didn't react at the first time. Humph! Stop pretending. You should know the grievances between us. I'm not in the mood to talk nonsense with you. Shin Wenbin snorted coldly and glanced at Lin Sun arrogantly. So, young Master Xian, you're here for revenge? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Revenge? Haha, you really think highly of yourself. Shin Wenbin laughed. I don't need to mobilize the Weiyang battleship to deal with you. Don't flatter yourself. Lin Sun also laughed. Indeed, the Weiyang battleship is an important weapon of the Empire. It's too grand to deal with me. But if you don't have the Weiyang battleship, I'm afraid you don't dare to stand in front of me alone today. Shin Wenbin's face was a little pale. When he was about to refute, he heard a deep and vigorous voice, Leave, Wenbin. This voice was full of indescribable majesty, which seemed to reach the depths of the soul and make people palpitate. When Lin Sun heard this voice, he suddenly smiled, and his deep black eyes were filled with coldness. He knew this voice. Sure enough, a graceful man in ancient clothes with a high hat and fluttering sleeves soon walked out of the Weiyang battleship. When he opened and closed his eyes, cold light surged which could take people's souls away. He was like a king who controlled the mountains and rivers and looked down on all directions. With his arrival, the atmosphere of the world suddenly became extremely silent, and even the wind stopped as if it was afraid. Shin Rudi, when he entered the bloodthirsty camp alone and took old Mo away with a tough attitude, Shu Sanqi could only keep silent. At this time, Lin Sun finally understood that Shin Wenbin might not be qualified to use a Weiyang battleship, but Shin Rudi absolutely could. Looking at the relationship between them, Lin Sun finally realized one thing. It was said that Shin Wenbin's father was a commander-in-chief of the Imperial Army of the Forbidden City. Perhaps this commander-in-chief was Shin Rudi in front of him. The training of the bloodthirsty camp is over. Lin Sun, come with me. Shin Rudi looked at Lin Sun with his frightening cold eyes, which made Lin Sun feel an indescribable horrible oppression. Lin Sun's face changed slightly. This guy still didn't give up the idea of taking him away. Is this your idea? Lin Sun took a deep breath and asked. This is the will of the Empire. Shin Wenbin said indifferently, Master Mo has been waiting for you for a long time. He hopes that you can meet him as soon as possible. Lin Sun sneered. But in my opinion, all this seems to have nothing to do with the will of the Empire, nor is it the will of old Mo at all. It's just the revenge of you and your son. At this time, he had to insist on this point. He could never be taken away by Shin Rudi, otherwise, according to Drill Master Shu Sanqi, he might completely lose his freedom in this life. How dare you? How dare you slander the will of the Empire? You deserve to die. Shin Wenbin shouted with disdain in his eyes. Shin Rudi smiled and said with a superior and indifferent attitude, Little guy, a wise man submits to circumstances. You are a smart man. You should know that no one can save you today. Instead of resisting, it's better to follow me obediently. Lin Sun said coldly, What if I don't agree? Shin Wenbin said angrily, Father, this little bastard refuses a toast only to drink a forfeit. Don't talk nonsense with him anymore. Just take him away directly. Obviously, he couldn't wait to teach Lin Sun a lesson. Shin Rudi seemed to be persuaded and walked towards Lin Sun step by step. Every step he took, there was a horrible pressure spreading out, which made the sky and the earth change color. In an instant, Lin Sun's body seemed to be imprisoned, and he couldn't move at all. A smart man will only suffer more pain if he makes mistakes. Young man, although you have reached the human gang realm, you are still as small as an ant in my eyes. I can tell you that no matter who comes here today, it's hard to change the fact that you will be taken away. When he said the last word, Shin Rudi suddenly stopped, and his eyes were full of divine light. He raised his hand and gently grasped at the void. Boom! A terrible palm print as white as jade was condensed, with dazzling spiritual light. It crushed the air and shook the void, just like an inescapable net coming down to cover Lin Sun. There was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. But Lin Sun looked surprisingly calm at this moment. He just looked at Shin Rudi in the distance with a faint disdain on his lip. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish between being smart and being stupid. For example, now, if you want to take this little guy away, you should at least ask my opinion. Suddenly, a kind and gentle voice sounded. Almost at the same time, Lin soon only felt that the pressure on his body suddenly disappeared, and he felt relaxed. And the white palm print in front of him, which was very close to him, suddenly burst into light rain and disappeared without a trace like vulnerable smoke. Even the terrible pressure between heaven and earth was ended, and peace was restored. When this voice fell, Shin Rudi's face was extremely solemn. He trembled all over as if he had suffered a terrible attack, and his body retreated uncontrollably. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, until he retreated 10 steps. He stabilized his body, but his face had become pale, and the blue veins on his forehead were bulging. Finally, he couldn't help coughing up a mouthful of blood. And it was just a voice that caused all this. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrible cultivation this old man had to have to achieve this step. He was just like a god. Although Lin soon knew that the old man would definitely not sit by and do nothing, he was still shocked when he saw such a shocking scene. "Father!" Shin Wenbin screamed and rushed forward, but there seemed to be an invisible wall in front of him, which shook him back fiercely. He screamed and staggered to the ground. "Don't come over!" Shin Rudi shouted. His face was unprecedentedly solemn, and there was a trace of indescribable fear between his eyebrows. He looked at the shabby treasure ship behind Lin Sun, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm Shin Rudi, now the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Army in the Forbidden City. May I ask who you are and why you stopped me?" No one answered. No one paid attention to him. This was a kind of direct disregard, as if Shin Rudi was not qualified to talk with him at all. This made Shin Rudi's face extremely pale, and he was extremely afraid. He had already announced his identity, but Lin Sun still dared to ignore him. There was only one situation, that was, Shin Rudi's identity was not enough in Lin Sun's eyes at all. The atmosphere was dead silent, and the situation suddenly changed, which made Shin Rudi and his son tremble. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly stepped forward, came to Shin Wenbin, and slapped him in the face. Shin Wenbin's mouth and nose were bleeding, and he screamed. "What are you doing?" Shin Rudi's face was livid, and his hair stood up in anger. "Don't you see that I'm a fox assuming the majesty of a tiger to bully others? If I don't take this opportunity to vent my anger, do I have to wait until later?" Lin Sun said with a smile, and then kicked Shin Wenbin hard. Shin Wenbin screamed, curled up on the ground, and twitched like a crazy lamb. Shin Rudi had never seen such a daring young man. How could he beat his son in front of his father? It was so abominable. "Do you think I'm shameless? But compared to you and your father, it's nothing. After all, I can't mobilize a Weiyang battleship, and I don't have a strong father to back me up. I can only take this opportunity to act like a tyrant and vent my anger," Lin Sun said with a smile, and kicked Shin Wenbin mercilessly. Blood splashed everywhere, and many bones were broken. Lin Sun kicked Shin Wenbin until he fainted. Shin Rudi was shocked and angry. He was so angry that he almost went crazy. If he hadn't been keenly aware that the horrible breath had been firmly locked on him, he would have slapped Lin Sun directly. It was too much. Chapter 192. Lin Sun finally gave up the idea of beating Shin Wenbin. There was no other way. If he continued to beat Shin Wenbin would die. It was not the time to fall out with Shin Rudi. He turned around and saw Shin Rudi's livid and exasperated face. As the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Army of the Forbidden City, Shin Rudi was a well-known and iron-fisted man with great prestige. However, he never expected that he would meet such a bold young man outside the bloodthirsty desert. Lin Sun knocked out his son in front of him. If this matter was spread to the Forbidden City, Shin Rudi would become a big joke. Shin Rudi almost went mad with hatred, but he didn't show it on his face. He knew that as long as the strong man on the shabby treasure ship was there, he couldn't do anything to the young man in front of him. However, there would always be opportunities in the future. We have to leave. Suddenly, the kind and gentle voice of the old man sounded. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. He knew that beating Shin Wenbin was the limit that the old man could tolerate. If Lin Sun wanted to deal with Shin Rudi, the old man would certainly not keep his acquiescence. If possible, Lin Sun really wanted to completely eradicate Shin Rudi and his son at this moment. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it now. This was the limitation of a fox assuming the majesty of a tiger. He could bully others, but there was a limit. The life and death of his enemies were not decided by him at all. You took old Mo away last time. I will let you send him back in person in the future. Lin Sun took a deep breath and looked at Shin Rudi calmly. Then he turned around and left. Little guy, you admit that you are a fox assuming the majesty of a tiger. I want to know how many days you can live when you have no one to rely on. Seeing Lin Sun's back off, Shin Rudi murmured in his heart with great hatred. Boy, you are still too young. That's not what you should do. As soon as Shu Jin set foot on the shabby treasure ship, he sighed and looked down upon Lin Sun. Lin Sun was stunned. What should I do? A touch of pride appeared on Shu Jin's rough and slightly drunk face, and he said, Watch carefully. As he spoke, the damaged treasured vessel emanated a rumbling that sounded like the roar of a wild beast under his control, and then it swiftly soared into the sky. Boom! Then, like an arrow that left the bow, it changed its direction and charged towards the Weiyang battleship in the distance in a wild and unrestrained manner. Lin Sun was surprised. Was he going to drive the treasure ship to crash into it? At this moment, Shu Jin was drunk. His face was flushed with madness, and he kept laughing loudly. Rumble! This treasured ship that was obviously extremely shabby was actually like a sharp awl as it fiercely pierced through the incomparably hard surface of the Weiyang battleship and pierced through it. On the Weiyang battleship there was a shocking hole, a mess on the ground, and a wave of screams and terrified voices. In the cabin, Lin Sun staggered and almost fell down, but all this could not eliminate the shock in his heart. This Shu Jin was too fierce. That was the mid-grade Weiyang battleship of the Empire. Its defense was so strong that even a Sea of Souls realm warrior would find it hard to shake it. However, Shu Jin actually drove a shabby treasured ship and crushed it. Ha 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 ha, little guy, see? This is a typical example of bullying others by force. Your little tricks can't relieve my hatred at all. Shu Jin laughed and drank a few mouthfuls of wine with a complacent look. Lin Sun smiled bitterly and could only admit that he was not as good as Shu Jin. Since the Weiyang battleship had a hole, the spiritual tattoo formation on it must have been destroyed. If he wanted to repair it, he was afraid that it would cost a lot of financial and material resources. The most important thing was that this battleship belonged to the Imperial Army. If it was destroyed like this, it would not only offend Shin Rudi and his son. Lin Sun thought that he was bold enough, but compared with Shu Jin, he was nothing. Of course, Lin Sun was also very clear that Shu Jin dared to do this, not only because he was a fox assuming the majesty of a tiger, but also because he was obviously not worried about the retaliation he would face. This was the crux of the problem. The only thing that surprised Lin Sun was that the shabby treasured ship driven by Shu Jin was not damaged at all after crashing into the Weiyang battleship. Obviously, it was not as simple as it looked. Shin Rudi was completely stunned and couldn't believe it. How dared an old treasured ship to damage the Weiyang battleship of the Empire so unscrupulously? Looking at his son who was knocked out, the Weiyang battleship with a hole in it, and the screams and panic coming from the battleship, Shin Rudi felt an unprecedented sense of powerlessness in his heart. An unprecedented sense of powerlessness welled up in Shin Rudi's heart. Who was the owner of that shabby treasure ship? Why did he dare to act so recklessly? Whoosh! A gust of wind and sand swept over and suddenly turned into Shu Sanchi's figure, which was as thin as a spear. Looking at the shocking scene, he had roughly figured out everything. The original anxiety in his heart faded away and was replaced by a touch of pleasure. "Who took Lin Sun away?" Shinruti asked. His voice was deep and low. "Do you remember the person I told you last time when you took old Mo away?" Shu Sanchi asked in reply. Shinruti was stunned and suddenly thought of something. His face suddenly changed. "Is it the coachman of Heiyao Shrine who has been following the Queen of Dark Night?" His heart couldn't help beating violently. Thinking of the kind voice and the terrible power in the voice just now, he felt a little lucky, because he was very clear that if the coachman really wanted to deal with him, he would have already become a dead body on the ground. There were many coachmen in the world, but there was only one who could follow the Queen of Dark Night in Heiyao Shrine. It turns out to be him. But how could it be him? Is there any connection between Lin Sun and Heiyao Shrine? Shinruti murmured and couldn't calm down. "I advise you to give up the plan of revenge on Lin Sun. Otherwise, even if Heiyao Shrine doesn't care about it, I won't let it go." Shu Sanchi coldly spat out these words, then turned around and left. Shinruti's face darkened. "You're not here to stop me, are you?" "Yes." Shu Sanchi's voice came from a distance. "He is no longer a trainee of your bloodthirsty camp," Shinruti shouted sternly. "As long as he has the bloodthirsty badge, he will be a trainee of bloodthirsty camp for the rest of his life." Shu Sanchi's figure disappeared completely before his voice died away. "Damn it!" Shinruti gritted his teeth and his face changed constantly. After a long time, he took a deep breath and became resolute again. He carried Shin Wenbin, who had fainted, and walked to Weiyang battleship. Those who were familiar with Shinruti knew that he would never let it go. In the cabin. "It's just a temporary pleasure to assume the majesty of a tiger, but it will bring you a lot of trouble. Why do you do this?" The old man looked at Lin Sun kindly, and there was a trace of unfathomable meaning in his pair of unfathomable eyes. "I don't think so much. I just want to vent my anger." Lin Sun thought for a while and said, "If it weren't for you this time, I would have been taken away by them. In that case, I would have suffered a lot of unpredictable humiliation and torture. In this case, I have to vent my anger in advance." The old man seemed to be a little surprised. After a while, he said thoughtfully, "It seems that you have never been afraid of the disasters caused by doing these things." Lin Sun shook his head. "I am not an unscrupulous person. I will only do what I think I should do." The old man nodded and said nothing more. He took out a delicate white jade slip and handed it to Lin Sun. "This is given to you by the little girl Xia Ji." Lin Sun was shocked. He took a deep breath and turned it over in his hand. Unfortunately, there was only a very simple sentence on the letter. "I'm fine, it's just that I'm lonely sometimes. Remember what I said, before I come back to find you, you must live." It was just a short paragraph, plain and unremarkable, just like a daily conversation. There was no strong emotion, but it made Lin Sun stunned. In a trance, he seemed to see a little girl in a black trench coat raising her beautiful and quiet face and looking at him seriously. After a long time, Lin Sun silently put away the white jade slip and put it away carefully, as if he was hiding a treasure. "Don't you doubt that it's fake?" the old man asked. Lin Sun took a deep breath and tried to get rid of the messy thoughts in his mind. He smiled and said, "It's not fake, I know." "Then you should have guessed it. At least for now, you still can't meet her," the old man said softly. Lin Sun nodded with some difficulty and said, "Okay. Is there anything you want to say?" The old man seemed to feel sorry for him. Lin Sun smiled and said, "I just want to know where you are going to take me now, senior." From the moment he set foot on this shabby treasure ship, Lin Sun knew that the road he was about to embark on was doomed to be out of his control. He hated this feeling, but he had to accept it. Because Xia Ji was still in the hands of the old man, even if she was not kidnapped and never threatened him, Lin Sun still couldn't get over it. To Lin Sun's surprise, the old man gave him an unexpected answer. "Mist City, the capital of Southwest Province. The reason why it was unexpected was that in Lin Sun's plan, he had originally planned to go there. When he was in the bloodthirsty camp, Drillmaster Young Ku had given him a certificate of passing the county test, which made Lin Sun's first thought when he left was to go to Southwest Province to take part in the province test. After passing the province test, he could go to the Forbidden City to take part in the nation test. If everything went well, he could enter the Green Deer School. Lin Sun believed that as long as he could enter the Green Deer School, he would have enough confidence to find out some valuable things. For example, what was the devouring abyss, the talent property that he was born with, and whether there had been any incidents related to this talent property in the Empire 14 years ago. As long as he could find out, he would be able to find out the truth behind why his spiritual heritage was taken away. Similarly, he could also collect news about Heiyao Shrine and find out the whereabouts of old Mo. This was the special feature of the Green Deer School. It was the first-class school in the Empire, where the most outstanding talents in the world were gathered. There were hidden dragons and crouching tigers. The school had unimaginable resources and power. As long as he entered the Green Deer School, it would be easier to get anything than to explore alone. Chapter 193. What Lin Sun didn't expect was that the place the old man was going to take him to was also Mist City, the capital of Southwest Province. For practitioners in the whole empire, the nation test is the fairest system for selecting talents, whether they are from the upper class or from the poor at the bottom. The old man seemed to see Lin Sun's doubt and explained patiently. Seizing this opportunity, the poor can make a great leap and get rid of the shackles of being born poor. Similarly, the real talents can be selected from the noble children in the test, instead of those ignorant and incompetent playboys who only know how to indulge in debauchery. When you can enter Green Deer School one day, you may have the wisdom and strength to know some truth. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. Senior, what is the truth? The old man smiled. There was an unfathomable look in his aged eyes. Whatever truth you want, the truth will be whatever it is. Lin Sun was stunned and lost in thought. He was a little disturbed. Did the old man already know something? Lin Sun suddenly remembered that when he was in Donglin Town, the old man once said that the Queen of Dark Night had gone to the depths of 3,000 mountains to find an old friend. But when they arrived, the place where the old friend lived had already been destroyed, leaving no clues. At that time, Lin Sun suspected that the place they were looking for was the mine prison where he had lived, but he was not sure. Now, after listening to the old man's intriguing words, Lin Sun couldn't help but think that the old man seemed to know something. Lin Sun still couldn't be sure. He couldn't ask because there were too many things involved in the mine prison, not only Master Lu, but also Lin Sun's life experience and enemies. The old man stopped talking and took out a white handkerchief, gently and carefully wiping a simple black pendant shaped like an ancient sword, but only 3 inches in size. The old man's kind face was full of concentration, solemnity and seriousness, which attracted Lin Sun's attention unconsciously. Lin Sun didn't know that this sword-shaped black pendant had a name that shocked the world 1,000 years ago, Sigh of the Eternal Night. This was the name of a set of spiritual tattoo armor. Few people knew it for 1,000 years. 3 days later, Mist City. As the capital city of the southwestern province of the Empire, Mist City could be said to be prosperous, with millions of people gathered. Its scale was huge and densely populated, far more than a border city like Donglin Town. At night, in a remote and old courtyard in Mist City, Lin Sun looked at the clean and brand-new room, feeling that it was like a home. In the evening of the same day, the old man left, leaving the residence prepared for Lin Sun. Without servants or maids, Lin Sun could only clean the small courtyard by himself. This small courtyard was not big, but it was quiet. Lin Sun was very satisfied to have such a free residence in Mist City, where every inch of land was expensive. But Lin Sun had to face a practical problem. It was far from enough to have a place to live. The resources he needed for daily cultivation and daily living needed to be solved urgently. After leaving the bloodthirsty camp, no one would provide all these for free. Lin Sun had already counted his belongings: 200 gold coins, a greenwave saber, 2 bottles of condensate pills, and some miscellaneous spiritual materials. In addition, there was nothing else. In the past, this wealth might be enough for Lin Sun to maintain the expenses for several months. But for Lin Sun, who had the cultivation of human gang realm, this wealth was simply a drop in the bucket to maintain the needs of cultivation and life. In other words, after arriving in Mist City, Lin Sun would face another extremely practical problem: making money. The province test will start in September, that is to say, I have to live in Mist City for nearly half a year. Lin Sun thought silently in his heart for a moment, and then he stood up, planning to go out and familiarize himself with the environment of Mist City. "Hey boy, wait a minute." Suddenly, a lazy voice came from the corner of the wall. Looking carefully, a burly figure was lying there. He looked rough, his cheeks were red, his eyes were drowsy, and his chest as hard as steel was exposed. He looked like a drunkard. This man was naturally Shu Jin. After sending Lin Sun here, he was also left here. According to the old man, Shu Jin would take care of Lin Sun's daily life before the province test ended. In principle, such an arrangement was naturally excellent, but Lin Sun didn't have any ideas about it now. Shu Jin had been drinking and sleeping since he entered this small courtyard. Not to mention taking care of Lin Sun's daily life, it would be lucky if he didn't cause trouble for Lin Sun. "What's the matter?" Lin Sun asked. "Hey, remember to bring me a jar of wine when you come back, the stronger the better. I remember there is a very famous liquor in Mist City, it seems to be called Burning Soul or something. Well, it should be this name." Shu Jin muttered for a long time, like a drunkard talking in his sleep. "Well, but take it easy, Jin. Don't run out and make trouble when you're drunk," Lin Sun said with a little helplessness. Last time Shu Jin went crazy, he even dared to hit the prestige battleship of the Empire, which made Lin Sun worry whether this guy would tear down the courtyard once he was drunk. "Don't be a woman. Hurry up. I've been drunk for 30 years, but I've never done anything stupid." Shu Jin shouted impatiently. Lin Sun sighed, shook his head and walked out of the courtyard. In the night, Mist City was like a city that never sleeps. The lights were bright, like a fire dragon, illuminating half of the night sky. On the spacious streets that were as dense as cobwebs, all kinds of buildings were arranged in a row. Even at night, it was still a lively scene of endless traffic and pedestrians. It was very prosperous. Lin Sun felt a little unaccustomed to returning to the city after a year. Everything in the bloodthirsty camp was dull and calm. Every day, in addition to training, fighting, and bloody battles, there were only cultivation and assessment. But now, walking on this bustling street, watching the pedestrians coming and going, and listening to all kinds of noises in the air, Lin Sun felt that it was a lifetime ago. Soon, Lin Sun shook his head and got rid of the distracting thoughts. He first went to a general store to buy some daily necessities such as rice, oil, salt, and spirit grains and spirit vegetables. Then, he turned around and entered a store that specialized in selling spirit materials to buy some finished spirit ink and spirit materials. Just doing these things alone cost him 20 gold coins. Soon, he spent another 50 imperial gold coins to buy 60 bottles of sapphire gang refining pills. Although they were extremely expensive, they were indispensable for cultivation. After running all over the streets for 7 days, Lin Sun finally bought a jar of soul burning from an unknown tavern. About half of his wealth had been spent, leaving him with only a little more than 100 gold coins. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a little distressed. He thoroughly realized how high the prices in Mist City were. After doing all this, Lin Sun had come to the center of Mist City unconsciously. There were many towering and gorgeous buildings here, and all kinds of famous chambers of commerce, trading companies, and various entertainment venues such as brothels, taverns, arenas, and so on. Such places were not affordable for ordinary practitioners at all. Just by looking at the clothes of the pedestrians coming and going on the street, Lin soon knew that all of them were either rich or respectable. Lin soon was not in the mood to wander around now. When he was about to leave, his eyes were suddenly attracted by a magnificent building in the distance. This building had an antique feel to it. It was hundreds of meters tall, and stood there like a towering mountain range. At this time, on the surface of the building, there was a huge light curtain, in which a meticulous and beautiful woman with a pretty face was broadcasting the news. According to reliable sources, 3 days ago, there was news from the governor's mansion that Governor Lu Wujuan would serve as the chief examiner in the province test in September. This news caused a great shock. Yesterday, the frontline battlefield in the western border of the empire sent a good report. After a fierce battle for half a month, the Iron Blood Army successfully defeated the 30,000 elite troops of Voodoo barbarian tribe. This morning, the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire announced that a new generation of small Ziying battleship will be launched soon. According to reliable sources, the power of the new generation of Ziying battleship will break the previous record and become another war weapon of the Empire. The beautiful woman was dignified and somewhat expressionless. She said calmly, "The following news will be broadcasted about cultivation. Today's most eye-catching news is undoubtedly." Lin soon raised his head and looked at the light curtain quietly. This light curtain was called spiritual screen. In the final analysis, it was actually a large phantom spiritual formation. Its light effect was very simple, which was to spread news. However, the cost of this spiritual screen was extremely expensive. It was a luxury. It cost tens of thousands of gold coins every day to run it. Even some of the top-tier powers would find it difficult to maintain such a massive expenditure, let alone a normal power. Only the imperial government would be able to maintain the normal operation of a spirit transmission light screen. Lin soon had heard before that in the capital cities of the 34 provinces of the empire, there was such a spiritual screen, which could communicate with each other and spread the major events happening everywhere in the empire in the first place. At that time, Lin soon felt it was magical, but when he saw this scene with his own eyes, he was relieved. As a spiritual tattooist, he naturally understood the essential mystery of this spiritual screen. Soon, Lin soon narrowed his eyes and was attracted by a news. It is said that Lian Fei, the son-in-law of Yao Tuahai, a great practitioner of Tao Insight realm in Green Maple County, successfully condensed the second-class pond of spiritual power when he broke through the human gang realm a few days ago. He was praised as another genius in Green Maple County, which caused a great sensation in the local area. According to analysis, Lian Fei will also participate in the province test in September this time. Chapter 194. Yao Tuahai was one of the most famous practitioners of Tao Insight realm in the southwest province of the empire. Only Governor Lu Wujuan could compete with him in status and power. Lian Fei, son of Lian Rufeng, was born in Feiyun village and later entered Donglin school in Donglin town to cultivate. Lin Sun was very familiar with them. When Lin Sun was in Donglin town, he was framed by Lian Fei frequently. Similarly, in the county test, Yao Tuahai attacked Lin Sun and Xia Ji violently. If it weren't for the Queen of Dark Night, Lin Sun and Xia Ji would have been killed. Now a year later, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel hatred when he heard the names of Yao Tuahai and Lian Fei again in Mist City. How could Lin Sun forget what happened in those years, as well as the suppression, despair and helplessness he suffered at that time? What surprised Lin Sun was that Lian Fei became Yao Tuahai's son-in-law. But it made sense when he thought about it carefully. Yao Tuahai's sudden attack was probably to stand up for Lian Fei. Humph! A second-class pond of spiritual power can make him a dazzling genius in Green Maple County? It's ridiculous. Lin Sun sneered in his heart. It wasn't that Lin Sun thought highly of himself, but that he had seen too many outstanding geniuses in the bloodthirsty camp. Compared with them, the second-class pond of spiritual power that Lien Fei condensed was not so dazzling at all. Of course, in the vast empire, it was normal for Lien Fei to be able to achieve this and be crowned with the title of a young genius. After all, for countless practitioners in the world, the second-class pond of spiritual power was a great achievement. When this guy comes to participate in the province test, maybe I should find a chance to solve the hatred of those years. Lin Sun was lost in thought. After a while, he was suddenly awakened by a burst of loud cheers. A huge field appeared on the spiritual screen. Tens of thousands of people gathered in it, waving their arms and cheering wildly. In the center of the huge field, under the brilliant spiritual light, a dreamy, slender figure was standing on the high platform, singing. This was an incomparably beautiful young woman. She had a head of light purple hair, a pair of sparkling eyes, and skin that seemed as if it could be broken by a gust of wind. Her exquisite and beautiful face carried a unique cold aura. Countless boys and girls under the high platform raised their hands and shouted a name together, Lu Qinyan, Lu Qinyan, Lu Qinyan. Their voices were like boiling water, and they were neat and uniform. Tens of thousands of people shouted together, and the scene was extremely magnificent and impassioned. Lin Sun was slightly taken aback, and he was almost infected by this enthusiasm. He saw that many passers-by were also looking at the spirit transmission light screen with fervent admiration and love in their eyes, and many young boys and girls were even screaming along. But soon, the light screen changed, and the dignified woman appeared again. She said, since her debut last year, Lu Qinyan has attracted countless fans with her angelic voice, unique temperament as cold as snow, and delicate and beautiful face. Her song Drunken Flower Shade, Parting Dream became popular throughout the empire in just 1 year and became one of the favorite songs of young practitioners in the world. She is also known as the Soul Singer. According to reliable sources, 3 months later, Lu Qinyan will come to Mist City to congratulate the centennial celebration of Keystone Business. She is very likely to sing on the stage again. At this point, a burst of cheers rang out, which made Lin Sun's ears a little unbearable. He couldn't help but secretly marvel at Lu Qinyan's great charm. Like saber play, sword practice and medical practice, art practice was a kind of practitioners. Arts cultivators used the zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, and poetry to enter the Tao. It was a rather elegant cultivation method, and was rather rare in the world. Because the conditions to become an art practitioner were too harsh. One must not only have the foundation of cultivation, but also be proficient in one of the arts. For example, those who entered the Tao by temperament practiced almost all the cultivation methods related to temperament. Even their fighting method was to kill the enemy with sound wave. Of course, art practice was not used for fighting. The status of art practitioners in the world was extremely noble, and they were often the distinguished guests of the upper class. Lu Qinyan was an art practitioner. She was proficient in temperament and singing, and she was also talented in writing lyrics and music. As soon as she made her debut, she won countless loyal fans in the empire. Lin Sun had never heard of this person before, but judging from the reaction of people nearby, he knew that Lu Qinyan was obviously an extremely famous art practitioner in the empire. Keystone Business is so generous that they can invite Lu Qinyan to sing. I must go to the scene to watch it that day. Yes, me too. Humph, don't be happy too early. I heard that Keystone Business only gave out 3,000 places, which have long been snatched up by the big shots in Mist City. Discussions broke out everywhere. Young boys and girls were eager to fight, looking forward to the day when Lu Qinyan came. Lin Sun was not interested in these, but he was a little surprised by the wealth of Keystone Business. In his opinion, to invite such a famous art practitioner, the cost must be amazing. Without staying any longer, Lin Sun turned away. When he returned to his residence, it was already late at night. Shu Jin was still lying in the corner and sleeping. But when he heard the sound of Lin Sun coming back, he immediately shouted, "Hurry up, the liquor worm in my stomach is rebelling. Hurry up and throw the wine over." Lin Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took out the jar of soul-burning liquor from the storage ring and threw it over. "Good wine." Shu Jin couldn't wait to drink a few mouthfuls and exclaimed, "It's still the familiar taste. It's so damn strong. By the way, when are you going to sign up?" Lin Sun said casually, "I've inquired about it. The registration for the province test will start half a month later." Shu Jin nodded and fell asleep with the jar in his arms. Lin Sun went into his room, sat at the desk, took out the spiritual ink and ordinary weapons he had bought, took a deep breath, picked up the inscribing pen, and began to refine spiritual weapons. Stars were twinkling outside the window, and the night wind was blowing gently. Except for Shu Jin's snoring sound, it was extraordinarily quiet. In front of the desk, the young man looked focused and meticulous, and the inscribing pen was moving smoothly between his palms and fingers. If he wanted to live in this city, he had to make money. And the only way Lin Sun could make money at present was to refine spiritual weapons. This could also be regarded as exerting his specialty. After all, he was already a spiritual tattooist who could refine spiritual tattoo formations. 2 hours later, a snowfall saber on middle grade of human rank was successfully refined. According to the market price of Mist City, a snowfall saber should be worth 300 imperial silver coins, that is, 3 imperial gold coins, excluding the cost. But Lin Sun wouldn't do it according to the market price. His life experience in Donglin Town had made Lin Sun realize that the spiritual weapons he refined were obviously more powerful than those on the market, although they were the same as those on the market. This was what Gu Yanping, the boss of Golden Hall, told Lin Sun, and Lin Sun himself had made a comparison. Lin Sun didn't know the reason, but he had a general guess. Because every time he was about to succeed in refining a spiritual weapon, he could keenly perceive that the gate to heaven in his sea of consciousness would ripple imperceptibly. This made Lin Sun realize that the reason why he could successfully refine spiritual weapons every time without encountering any failure might have something to do with the fluctuation from the gate to heaven. Of course, this was just Lin Sun's speculation. After doing all this, Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the bed, closed his eyes, and practiced meditating magic. After reaching the human gang realm, he had lit up 18 spiritual stars in his sea of consciousness, and his perception could cover everything within a radius of 300 meters. Ordinary human gang realm overmatches could only perceive within a radius of 300 meters at most. This was the unique benefit of practicing meditating magic. Of course, the strengthening of soul power was definitely more than that. There were many other benefits, which I won't go into detail. After practicing meditating magic, Lin Sun didn't delay, and continued to run Nature Insight and Spirit Devour Scripture to refine his cultivation. This kind of hard work and rest life was the same as when he was in Donglin Town, except that Xia Solstice and Shu Jin were not around. Rumble, the pure and translucent gang qi, with a touch of gold, circulated along the meridians of Lin Sun's body like a roaring river. In his sea of qi, the pond of spiritual power rotated like a storm whirlpool, echoing with the spiritual vortexes from the 4 acupoints of the heart vessel up and down, producing a terrible refining force. The gang qi passing through his body seemed to be pressed by 2 millstones and refined repeatedly, showing an illusory light gold color. This was the manifestation that the quality of the gang qi had reached the extreme. It was terrifyingly pure, which also meant that the power Lin Sun could release was enough to crush most of the human gang realm overmatches in the world. All this was due to the unique pond of spiritual power in Lin Sun's body. It was not the first-class pond of spiritual power, the Eye of Storm, because the Eye of Storm didn't have such a shocking refining force. Lin Sun called it Windstorm Millstone. One by one, Lin Sun swallowed the sapphire gang refining pills he just bought tonight. Then, they were refined over and over again and completely integrated into his body, constantly refining and consolidating his cultivation. Lin soon didn't stop practicing until he had swallowed 6 sapphire gang refining pills, which had reached the limit that he could bear. Lying on the bed, Lin soon began to feel the cultivation of martial arts silently. After advancing to the human gang realm, the gang chi in the body could be released to hurt the enemy through the air, which also made a qualitative change in the fighting style of practitioners. Marching boxing, which he had mastered before, was useless. At present, only 6-word saber play and the first move of Tianyuan saber play, reaching for the stars, could come in handy. Of course, there were also the fighting skills he learned from the bloodthirsty camp. But skills were different from fighting methods. If he wanted to exert the greatest power in a real battle, he must have the matching fighting method. However, Lin soon needed to master these fighting methods again. After all, he had never really fought since advancing to the human gang realm. Lin Sun was also looking forward to what kind of power he could exert in a battle now that he had the cultivation of human gang realm. P.S. The foreshadowing is almost done and the show will begin soon. Chapter 195. The next morning. After breakfast, Lin was about to go out with the snowfall saber, but was stopped by Shu Jin. "Boy, are you also a spiritual tattooist?" Lin was stunned and nodded, yes. Although he didn't make much noise in his room last night, it was impossible to hide it from Shu Jin. Shu Jin continued to ask, "Oh, so you are going to sell spiritual weapons now?" Lin said, "Isn't it normal? Who will buy you liquor without money?" Shu Jin chuckled and waved his hand. Go, I was just asking casually." Lin soon felt a little strange and said, "Old Jin, do you have any opinion on me selling spiritual weapons?" Shu Jin said unhurriedly, "Well, I'm just curious how a dignified spiritual tattooist has to go out and sell spiritual weapons to make money. If those guys from the commune of spiritual tattooists know it, they will definitely come to teach you a lesson." Lin was stunned. "What do you mean?" Shu Jin raised his head and drank a mouthful of liquor. He looked at Lin as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "Boy, are you really muddle-headed or your family muddle-headed? Spiritual tattooists are so respected that they will be surrounded by people wherever they go. But look at you, you are just like a humble peddler. You have lost all the face of spiritual tattooist." Lin was surprised. "So powerful?" Shu Jin said disdainfully, "Only you don't take spiritual tattooists seriously." Lin smiled bitterly. He had never regarded himself as a very special person. But he also knew that the status of spiritual tattooists in this world was extremely high. A real spiritual tattooist would often become the target of competition among the major forces. Even in the whole empire, spiritual tattooists were the most unique and transcendent profession. There was only one reason that spiritual tattooists played an important role. Almost all the things involved in the cultivation of practitioners were inseparable from spiritual tattooists. For example, spiritual tattooists could refine spiritual weapons and equipment for practitioners, refine beast tags for beast tamers, arrange spiritual formations for spiritual plants masters, and refine alchemy furnaces for pharmacists. Spiritual tattooists could almost be seen in all aspects of cultivation. However, there were not many spiritual tattooists in the world, and they were even rare. There might not be one spiritual tattooist in every 1,000 practitioners. This also made the status of spiritual tattooists more unique and honorable in the empire. Sure enough, you know nothing. I wonder how you became a spiritual tattooist. Didn't your master tell you how a spiritual tattooist should show his value? Shu Jin sighed. Old Jin, I really don't know. Why don't you give me some advice? Lin asked modestly. Shu Jin snorted and stretched out a finger. A jar of soul-burning wine. Lin Sun nodded quickly. Deal. Shu Jin chuckled. You're quite interesting, kid. Sometimes you're terrifyingly smart, but sometimes you're like an idiot. Next, Shu Jin finally pointed out a clear place for Lin. The Commune of Spiritual Tattooists of the Empire. The Commune of Spiritual Tattooists could be regarded as an extremely large alliance of spiritual tattooists in the Empire, which could be found in 34 provinces of the Empire. As the capital city of Southwest Province, there was also a commune of spiritual tattooists in Mist City. When Lin Sun finally found the place after asking all the way, he saw a magnificent and lofty building standing there, as eye-catching as a crane in a flock of chickens. On the top of the building, a line of vigorous and ancient characters, Commune of Spiritual Tattooists in Mist City, was reflected by a phantom spiritual formation. Every single word flowed with brilliant colors, and it was dreamlike and illusory. It was like an expanse of gorgeous multicolored clouds were rising, and it was rather beautiful and dazzling. Seeing this, other practitioners might exclaim and be shocked by the generosity of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists. But Lin Sun's first reaction was to let out a heartfelt sigh. Rich, really rich, too rich. In order to maintain the illusion of the phantom spiritual formation at all times, it would consume a shocking amount of spirit crystals. However, such a spiritual formation was only used as a signboard. It was more than just rich and overbearing. It was simply inhumane. But the more it was like this, the more Lin Sun looked forward to it. He came here to make money. The richer the commune of spiritual tattooists was, the more profitable it was. Without any hesitation, Lin Sun walked in. "Welcome to the commune of spiritual tattooists, child." As soon as he entered, a beautiful maidservant immediately came over to greet him. Her attitude was neither humble nor arrogant, and she was refined and courteous while a flawless smile hung on the corners of her mouth. "Young master, may I know if you're here to purchase treasures, issue assignments, or sell items?" "I want to walk around first," Lin Sun said casually. Although Lin Sun's clothes were ordinary, he was quite handsome. Although he was only 14 years old, he was tall and straight, with deep black eyes and a sharp face. His whole body was full of an unearthly spirit, which made the beautiful maid dare not neglect him. She nodded with a smile. "Child, feel free to do as you please. If you need anything, I will serve you as soon as possible." With that, she bowed slightly and turned away. Lin Sun appreciated her service attitude very much. The commune of spiritual tattooists was very large and magnificent, with carved beams and painted pillars. It was distributed in different areas, such as the spiritual treasure area, the exchange area, the task area, and so on. Although it was in the morning, the commune of spiritual tattooists was crowded with people, most of whom were practitioners. It was quite lively. This was just the area opened to the public by the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists. In fact, as an alliance of spiritual tattooists in the Empire, the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists was established for only one real purpose: to serve spiritual tattooists. Any spiritual tattooist could enjoy a lot of convenience in the Commune as long as he was certified by the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists. But at the same time, every spiritual tattooist needed to make some contribution to the commune of spiritual tattooists while enjoying the convenience. Of course, this kind of contribution was not demanding and even easy. In every commune of spiritual tattooists there was a task area. Every day, different tasks of spiritual tattoos would be issued. As long as a spiritual tattooist could help to solve them, he could not only get a lot of money but also corresponding points. The more points a spiritual tattooist had, the more privileges he could enjoy in the commune. Lin Sun wandered around and browsed the first floor for a long time. In the end, he found nothing special here, which was no different from other businesses. As for the second floor, only spiritual tattooists certified by the commune and some distinguished bigwigs could enter it. Lin Sun couldn't enter it yet. Soon, Lin Sun got rid of distracting thoughts and went directly to the certification area on the first floor. The certification area was extremely deserted. When Lin Sun arrived, there was only a middle-aged man in gray sitting there with his eyes closed. Lin Sun didn't know whether he was meditating or asleep. But when Lin soon arrived, the middle-aged man in gray suddenly opened his eyes and showed a warm smile. But when he saw Lin Sun was just a teenager, he couldn't help being stunned and asked, "Child, this is the certification area for spiritual tattooists." Lin Sun said, "I'm here for certification." The middle-aged man in gray was surprised and asked, "Child, are you a spiritual tattooist?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "My words may not count. You may know after the certification." The middle-aged man in gray was still a little surprised. The teenager in front of him was too young, at most 14 or 15 years old. It was reasonable to say that Lin Sun was a spiritual apprentice, but it was incredible to say that Lin Sun was a spiritual tattooist. "Child, how old are you this year?" he couldn't help asking. Lin Sun asked in reply, "Does the certification of a spiritual tattooist need to consider age?" The middle-aged man in gray suddenly felt embarrassed and said, "Child, don't get me wrong. I'm just a little curious." Saying this, he waved to a maid, thought for a moment, and said, "Take this child to the second floor for certification." Coincidentally, this maid was the one who received Lin Sun just now. Hearing the words, she couldn't help being stunned for a moment. Then she reacted and said quickly, "Child, please come with me." She took Lin Sun away at once. This teenager seems to have a good temperament. He shouldn't be a liar. But how old is he? How could he reach the level of a spiritual tattooist? Watching Lin Sun leave, the middle-aged man in gray frowned and still felt a little confused. He knew best that it was absolutely not so easy to become a real spiritual tattooist. In terms of cultivation, human gang realm was the lowest standard to measure a spiritual tattooist. Relatively speaking, it was easier to achieve this step. But in terms of spiritual tattoos, it was required to refine a spiritual tattoo formation by himself. This wasn't something that just anyone could do. It was no exaggeration to say that there were countless spiritual tattoo apprentices in the whole empire, but only 1 in 10,000 could refine a spiritual tattoo formation by himself. The cruelest thing was that most spiritual tattoo apprentices in the world couldn't step into the ranks of spiritual tattooists all their lives for various reasons. It could be seen how difficult it was to become a spiritual tattooist. The middle-aged man in gray had received many spiritual tattooists these years, and almost all of them were adult practitioners who had lived for decades or even hundreds of years. But a teenager like Lin Sun was extremely rare. At least the middle-aged man in gray hadn't seen one these years. Yes, not even one. That was why he was so surprised and stunned when facing Lin Sun. "Oh no, this kid isn't a swindler, right?" Suddenly, the middle-aged man in gray's face changed, and he felt a little anxious. But after thinking about it, he couldn't help but hesitate. If this boy was a liar, what could he cheat from the commune of spiritual tattooists? After thinking about it, the middle-aged man in gray couldn't calm down because of gains and losses. At the same time, Lin Sun was walking to the second floor accompanied by the beautiful maid. Along the way, the maid couldn't help glancing at him with curiosity and doubt. It seemed that she couldn't believe that such a boy could be a spiritual tattooist. Lin Sun keenly noticed this and couldn't help teasing her with a smile. "Girl, you seem to be very interested in me?" The beautiful maid blushed and her cheeks flushed. Chapter 196. Interrupted by Lin Sun, the beautiful maid immediately blushed and dared not to let her imagination run wild. Soon, she led Lin Sun to the second floor of the commune. After walking along a long passageway for a short while, they arrived at an antique hall. At this time, an elegant man in a dark green brocade robe with a finely trimmed beard was sitting cross-legged behind a desk. With a tobacco pipe in his left hand and an inscribing pen in his right, the man was leisurely inscribing spiritual tattoos on an indigo animal skin while puffing out smoke. "Child, this is Chu Feng, the director of the commune of spiritual tattooists." The maid introduced Chu Feng in a low voice. Lin Sun nodded. In his eyes, Chu Feng was undoubtedly an elegant man who knew how to enjoy himself. His clothes were made of exquisite materials. They looked ordinary but were full of obscure spiritual tattoos. The ornaments he wore were also of good quality and pleasing to the eye. Even the tobacco pipe in his hand was made of the small rib bones of the earthly dragon beast, glowing with a faint cyan halo. What impressed Lin Sun most was the two fine tufts of beard above Chu Feng's lips, which were finely trimmed and raised. Together with his elegant face, they added a sense of elegance. But soon, Lin Sun was attracted by the spiritual tattoos Chu Feng was inscribing. The indigo animal skin on the desk should be tanned from the wings of the blue lightning bird. It was an excellent spiritual material and could be used to refine the upper-grade human rank inner armor. The inscribing pen Chu Feng used had a very unique shape. It was thin and translucent like a sharp awl, and there were drops of crimson patterns that looked like tear stains on it. As he continued to inscribe, wisps of fine and dense spiritual tattoos appeared. His movements were smooth and skillful. At a glance, Lin Sun knew that Chu Feng was a spiritual tattooist who had been immersed in spiritual tattoos for many years and had extraordinary attainments. While Lin Sun was sizing up Chu Feng, the maid had already reported the purpose of her visit to Chu Feng. "My friend, please sit down. Let me finish the wind shadow lightning formation first, and then I'll certify your qualification as a spiritual tattooist." Chu Feng didn't even raise his head and continued inscribing spiritual tattoos. But his voice was gentle and amiable, which made people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze. Lin Sun answered and sat on one side. When the maid saw this, she quietly retreated. The antique hall suddenly became quiet, and only the rustling sound of the inscribing pen could be heard. As time went by, Lin Sun gradually became impatient. He couldn't help but look up, only to see Chu Feng frowning and staring at the blue animal skin on the table, as if he had encountered a great problem. At this moment, he was as motionless as a statue. The pipe in his hand had already been extinguished, but he was completely unaware of it. As a spiritual tattooist, Lin Sun naturally knew at a glance that Chu Feng was in deep thought. If he couldn't solve the problem, he could even sit like this for 3 to 5 days. This was not the first time he had encountered such a situation when he was a child, including Master Lu. Lin Sun couldn't help but stand up and stride forward to arrive before the table, and then his gaze descended onto the indigo beast skin. He didn't want to sit here and wait. It was simply a waste of his time. Almost at a glance, Lin Sun recognized that Chu Feng was refining an inner armor. But it was different from the usual ones, because it was inscribed with 3 completely different spiritual tattoos, namely Mountain Concentration Spiritual Formation, Vajra Spiritual Formation, and Wind Shadow Lightning Spiritual Formation. The first 2 spiritual formations were both defensive spiritual formations. One was of earth attribute and the other was of metal attribute. They belonged to the category of elementary spiritual tattoo formations. Only the 3rd spiritual formation was very particular. It took into account both wind and lightning attributes, and its spiritual tattoo pattern was also the most complicated. It belonged to the category of intermediate spiritual tattoo formations. At this moment, the problem Chu Feng encountered was in the 3rd spiritual tattoo formation. It was not because of the refining method, but the lack of a medium between the 3 spiritual tattoo formations, which made it impossible for them to produce harmony and connection with each other. In this case, even if the refining was successful, the power of this inner armor would be much weaker. Lin Sun looked at it carefully for a long time and suddenly said, "If you help me get the qualification of a spiritual tattooist now, I can help you solve this problem." Chu Feng seemed to be unaware of it. Or in other words, at this moment, all his mind was focused on thinking, and he had long forgotten everything around him. Seeing this, Lin Sun immediately sighed in his heart. He suddenly bent down and snatched the inscribing pen from Chu Feng's hand. "Nonsense! What are you doing?" Chu Feng suddenly woke up and scolded Lin Sun. "I'm helping you solve your problem," Lin Sun said casually. Then he sat down on the ground, and was about to inscribe on the indigo animal skin with the inscribing pen. "Where are you from, young man? Who let you in? Get out of here!" Chu Feng was so anxious that he scolded Lin Sun again and again. Even in a rage, he still maintained a kind of elegant demeanor and didn't attack Lin Sun immediately. "If you disturb me again, this inner armor will be ruined," Lin Sun said as he began to inscribe. You, Chu Feng was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. He wanted to slap Lin Sun away, but he finally restrained himself. It was not that he didn't dare to do so, but the inner armor Lin Sun was inscribing was extremely expensive, and some of the spiritual materials were extremely difficult to find. It took him several years to collect all of them. Once Lin Sun started, the unfinished inner armor would be completely ruined as long as there was any mistake. This was not what Chu Feng wanted to see. But what if he didn't do anything and just watched the boy make trouble? Chu Feng suddenly fell into a dilemma. His elegant face was full of exasperation. Since he became the director of the commune of spiritual tattooists in Mist City, it was the first time for him to meet such a daring teenager. "Let me ask you, earth is Kun, metal is Dui, wind is Sun, and lightning is Zhen. If you want them to resonate with each other, what should be the medium?" Lin Sun suddenly asked. He was still inscribing when he spoke. "Can." Chu Feng was startled and answered subconsciously. Soon after, he felt a wave of anger in his heart. This little fellow is giving me pointers? How arrogant he was! Yes, Kun benefits from Can, Dui is born from Can, Sun and Can complement each other, and Zhen and can resonate. Since you know this, why don't you inscribe a Can's 4 symbols formation as the medium? Hearing this, Chu Feng answered almost without thinking, "That's impossible. This inner armor is based on the skin of the blue lightning bird, which contains the 2 attributes of Can and Zhen. It can't accommodate 4 spiritual formations at the same time." Then he became angry again. What was wrong with him today? Why was he led by the nose by this teenager? But the next moment, his mind was attracted by Lin Sun's words. Who said it can't? Although the power of the Can's 4 symbols formation is great, why don't you throw away some of the spirit pattern structures in the formation and leave only the 4 symbols for the circulation of the Can's water? With this as a medium, the other 3 spirit formations can be compatible. As Lin Sun said, he had inscribed a complete spiritual tattoo formation on the animal skin. At this time, Chu Feng was stunned as if he was struck by lightning. After a long time, his eyes brightened and he clapped his hands. No wonder, that's why. As he spoke, he had completely sobered up. He looked at Lin Sun with a strange expression. Just now, was it the teenager in front of him who was instructing him? How could it be possible? How old was he? How could he do this? Well, the spiritual tattoo formation on this inner armor has been inscribed. But if you want to give full play to its power, you'd better soak it in the Zhenkan heavy water for a period of time. Lin Sun dropped the inscribing pen, stood up, and pointed at the indigo animal skin on the table, which was emitting wisps of soft spiritual light, and said, "Strictly speaking, it was not an animal skin, but an inner armor full of spiritual qi and glowing with illusory colors." Chu Feng stepped forward quickly, picked up the inner armor, and carefully looked at it for a moment. His heart was filled with a touch of shock. This Sun Zhen spiritual armor on middle grade of human rank was successfully refined in this way? It was incredible! Chu Feng felt like he was dreaming. After a long time, he couldn't help looking at Lin Sun and asked, "Friend, who are you?" There was a touch of reverence in his voice. Lin Sun said with a smile, "I've told you before that I'm here to be certified as a spiritual tattooist." Chu Feng was in a daze. After thinking for a while, he patted his forehead and said, "I remember," but, looking at Lin Sun's excessively young and handsome face, it was hard for him to imagine how such a teenager could be so incredible. "Now, the inner armor has been refined. Is it time for me to be certified?" Looking at Chu Feng's surprised look, Lin Sun felt helpless. He had enough of being treated as a monster by old Mo. Yes, that's right. Chu Feng nodded, and then took several deep breaths to suppress all kinds of shock and doubts in his heart. Then he said with a smile, "But haven't I been certified just now?" Lin Sun was stunned when Chu Feng pointed at the Sun Zhen spiritual armor on the table. Lin Sun understood at once and smiled as well. These are the 4 kinds of badges that represent different levels of spiritual tattooists. Chu Feng turned over his hand and took out a jade box, in which there were 4 jade badges of different colors. Each badge was the size of a copper coin and had a simple and classical style. They represent the 4 kinds of qualification certificates of primary, intermediate, senior and top spiritual tattooist respectively. "May I know your current level, my young friend?" There was a strong curiosity in Chu Feng's eyes. Primary. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun directly chose the primary spiritual tattooist qualification certificate, which was a bronze jade badge with the logo of the Spiritual Tattooist Guild engraved on the front and blank on the back. "Primary?" Chu Feng said in surprise. "But in my opinion, your method of refining the Sun Zhen spiritual armor is already worthy of the intermediate spiritual tattooist badge." Lin Sun had to explain patiently, "I just inscribed a simple spiritual tattoo formation with the help of others. It's you who really finished the inner armor." Chu Feng suddenly understood and said with a smile, "It's rare to see a young spiritual tattooist like you. If it's known by others, it will definitely cause a lot of uproar. I understand that you did this to protect yourself." Chapter 197. Be Wise and Play Safe? Lin Sun was in a daze and nodded cheerfully. "Yes, that's right." Chu Feng thought of how he made a fool of himself because of the shock just now and couldn't help sighing with emotion. "You're right. If other spiritual tattooists know that you have such a high attainment in spiritual tattoos at such a young age, I'm afraid they will also be as embarrassed as me." He cupped his hands and said solemnly, "My young friend, I was presumptuous just now. Please forgive me." Lin Sun smiled and said, "My name is Lin Sun. You can call me Lin Sun." Chu Feng was an extremely gentleman. Lin Sun couldn't help but have a good impression of him since he treated him so politely. He knew clearly that a guy with a strange temper like old Mo would have already driven him away. Next, Chu Feng invited Lin Sun to take a seat. He took out a jade archive and began to record the information about the certification of spiritual tattooists for Lin. This information was a kind of certificate, which meant that from now on, as long as Lin Sun held the bronze badge of primary spiritual tattooist issued by the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists, he could enjoy the same convenience in any commune of spiritual tattooists in the 34 provinces of the empire. Name: Lin Sun. Birthplace: Feiyun Village, Donglin Town. Apprentice: none. Age: 14. What? While asking Lin Sun, Chu Feng recorded on the jade archive. When he learned Lin Sun's age, his wrist trembled and he almost made a mistake. 14? Chu Feng lost his composure again. He looked at Lin Sun with astonishment in his eyes. A 14-year-old spiritual tattooist could hardly be found in the whole empire. It was said that even in the 3 families of spiritual tattoos, there were very few 14-year-old spiritual tattooists. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were as few as the stars in the sky. Nowadays, the most famous one in the empire was Feng Qinyu, the genius girl of Green Deer School, who had the attainment of a spiritual tattooist at the age of 19. It was well known that spiritual tattooist was a profession, but it was also divided into 4 levels: spiritual apprentice, spiritual tattooist, and spiritual tattooist. Each level had different divisions. For example, spiritual tattooists were divided into 4 levels: primary, intermediate, senior, and top. One could imagine how dazzling Feng Qinyu was to be crowned with the title of Spiritual Rune Master at the age of 19. However, compared with Feng Qinyu, Lin Sun, who had the title of spiritual tattooist, at the age of 14, was not inferior to Feng Qinyu. You know Feng Qinyu, right? Chu Feng asked. Lin Sun nodded. I heard that he is a genius of the Feng clan, one of the 3 big families of spiritual tattoos. His father is the patriarch of the Feng clan, and his master is the dean of the Green Deer School of Spiritual Tattoos. This was what old Mo had told Lin Sun, who was deeply impressed by the name. Chu Feng sighed emotionally. In my opinion, you're not inferior to Feng Qinyu at all. You might even surpass him. Lin Sun hurriedly said, Senior, you flatter me. Chu Feng took a deep breath and said, Do you know how big a sensation it will cause if I report your matter to the top of the commune of spiritual tattooists? Lin Sun frowned. Without waiting for him to speak, Chu Feng said with a smile, Of course, this is only my personal opinion. A genius like you probably doesn't want to receive too much attention. Lin Sun took a deep breath and said seriously, Senior, can you promise me one thing? Chu Feng seemed to know what Lin Sun was going to say. He couldn't help saying, Do you know that if you can get the attention of the real bigwigs in the commune of spiritual tattooists, you can have a meteoric rise overnight and have unimaginable status and privileges? Lin Sun shook his head. I'm not interested in these things. Chu Feng was surprised. In his opinion, few young people like Lin Sun could resist such temptation. Fame, prestige, wealth, status, he could have anything he wanted. How could a young man refuse such temptation? But Lin Sun refused without thinking. He looked calm and composed. Obviously, it was not a refusal, but a heartfelt thought. Chu Feng said seriously, Do you really want to do this? Lin Sun nodded. I hope you can help me. Chu Feng sighed with emotion. His words were full of undisguised appreciation. Lin Sun, you are the most extraordinary young spiritual tattooist I have ever seen. I believe your future achievements are bound to be limitless. Lin Sun smiled and said, So, Senior, you agree? Chu Feng laughed. A gentleman should help others achieve their goals. Since you have said so, how can I refuse? I not only promise to keep your secret, but also promise that no one in the commune of spiritual tattooists in Mist City will know all the information about you. Lin Sun stood up and bowed seriously. Thank you, Senior. Words alone are no guarantee. I'll sign a spiritual tattoo agreement with you right now, Chu Feng said and took out a silver scroll. The scroll was covered with gorgeous and exquisite spiritual tattoos, giving off an obscure and boundless aura. Lin Sun was immediately moved. Is this the spiritual book of gods and demons? Chu Feng said, Yes. Lin Sun couldn't keep calm after getting the confirmation. He once heard from Master Lu that in ancient times, the continuous wars between gods and demons caused great chaos in the world. People were plunged into misery and suffering. In the end, the gods and demons reached an agreement and signed a contract to ensure that they would not invade each other. If they violated the contract, they would be punished by heaven. It seemed as untrustworthy as an oath, but this contract was said to be powered by the power of the heavens. It was the most unfathomable and inviolable contract. It had indeed restrained both the gods and demons, causing both sides to stop the war that had lasted for a long time. Later, according to this contract, spiritual tattooists developed the spiritual book of gods and demons, which was limited by the power of spiritual tattoos. It was so mysterious that people dared not violate the contract easily. Otherwise, they would be in big trouble. Of course, this was just a rumor. Even Master Lu couldn't judge whether it was true or not. But the spiritual book of gods and demons did exist. However, it was extremely rare in the world. Because of the lack of some special spiritual materials, no spiritual tattooist could refine it for hundreds of years. This also made the spiritual book of gods and demons a peerless treasure. One used meant one less. Seeing Chu Feng take out such a precious spiritual book of gods and demons, to keep his promise, Lin Sun was a little surprised. Don't think too much. I'm optimistic about your future achievements. I'm doing this to build a good relationship with you. Chu Feng seemed to see through Lin Sun's mind, so he spoke out his real thoughts frankly. Lin Sun shrugged and said, "To tell you the truth, I wouldn't dare to sign this contract if you didn't treat me with sincerity." Chu Feng laughed. Lin Sun also laughed. Straightforward people talking about straightforward things made both of them feel happy. Immediately, the two signed the spiritual book of gods and demons with their own blood essence. The moment the contract was completed, the fiend god spirit tome suddenly combusted and turned into nothingness. Lin Sun suddenly felt that there seemed to be a mark in his soul. It must be the power of the spiritual book of gods and demons. Lin Sun even had a feeling that when his soul force was strong enough to a certain extent, it would be enough to erase this trace. Of course, it was just a feeling. After signing the spiritual book of gods and demons, the relationship between Lin Sun and Chu Feng improved imperceptibly. They were no longer as polite as before. Knowing that Lin Sun came to the commune of spiritual tattooists just to make money, Chu Feng couldn't help but feel amused. But he still patiently guided Lin Sun. It was actually very easy to make money in the commune of spiritual tattooists. First of all, in the task area on the first floor, many tasks would be issued every day. As long as one could solve them, he could get different amounts of rewards and accumulate points. At the same time, spiritual tattooists could also put the spiritual weapons they refined in the spiritual treasure area for consignment. There were two ways of consignment. One was to mark the price, and the other was to bid. In addition, there were various other ways to make money. As long as one passed the certification of the commune of spiritual tattooists, he could enjoy such treatment. Lin Sun took out the snowfall saber of human rank he refined. After being appraised by Chu Feng immediately suggested Lin Sun to put it in the spiritual treasure area for auction. Lin Sun agreed without hesitation. After doing all this, he didn't delay any more and left. As soon as Lin Sun left, Chu Feng hurriedly summoned the middle-aged man in gray and the beautiful maid who had received Lin Sun. "Have you all met the young man who came here for the spiritual tattooist certification today?" Chu Feng asked gently. The middle-aged man in gray and the beautiful maid nodded in unison. They were puzzled. Did something bad happen? From today on, don't disclose anything about him to anyone else. Chu Feng's originally gentle expression suddenly became dignified, even with a touch of coldness. "If I find out that any rumors about him are spread, regardless of whether you did it or not, I can tell you bluntly that the consequences are not something you can bear." The middle-aged man in gray and the beautiful maid's faces changed abruptly. They were terrified and swore repeatedly with their lives. Chu Feng's look became gentle again. He knew clearly that the oath was not credible at all. But as the director of the commune of spiritual tattooists, he had the authority and power to keep them from doing anything reckless. After thinking for a while, Chu Feng looked at the beautiful maid and said, "You are young, right? If the young man comes here again in the future, you will be responsible for receiving him personally. From now on, your monthly salary will be tripled. This is your reward." The beautiful maid called Yunk nodded hurriedly. She was both terrified and surprised. She was a little confused. "Jia Zhen, you are an old man in the commune. From today on, you will be responsible for everything in the spiritual treasure area. Remember, if you see the young man's spiritual weapon for sale in the future, you are not allowed to mention his identity to anyone." The middle-aged man called Jia Zhen was overjoyed and shouted, "Don't worry, Director. I will do as you say." The position of the person in charge of the spiritual treasure area was a lucrative one. It was much better than the position of the person in charge of the certification area. "Well, you can go now." Chu Feng waved his hand. Before leaving, Jia Zhen couldn't help asking, "Director, may I ask the young man, how should I call him?" Chapter 198. As usual, Zhou Qin walked into the Society of Spiritual Tattooists. Zhou Qin was a student of Mist College. He had just broken through the human gang realm last year and was quite famous in Mist College. Many instructors and classmates believed that with Zhou Qin's current strength, he could participate in the province test that was about to begin in September. Zhou Qin also wanted to have a try. But what bothered him was that he lacked a suitable spiritual weapon after reaching the human gang realm. It was well known that human-rank spiritual weapons were divided into 4 levels: lower, middle, upper, and top. Top human-rank spiritual weapons were too rare and expensive. Zhou Qin didn't dare to have extravagant expectations. The power of lower human-rank spiritual weapons was limited, and it was difficult to exert the full power of a human gang realm practitioner. Therefore, Zhou Qin set his sights on middle and upper human-rank spiritual weapons. Generally speaking, most human gang realm practitioners would choose middle human-rank spiritual weapons. One reason was that they were relatively cheap, and the other was that they could exert the practitioner's full power. However, for a practitioner like Zhou Qin, who was famous at a young age and had first-class talent, the power of a middle human-rank spiritual weapon was not enough for him. If he chose upper human-rank spiritual weapons, although they were powerful, they were expensive. Zhou Qin couldn't guarantee whether they were suitable for him or not. The reason was very simple. The choice of spiritual weapon didn't depend on the level of the weapon, but whether it was suitable for him or not. If he chose a spiritual weapon of too high a level, it would consume a lot of spiritual power. Sometimes, it would make it difficult for the practitioner to fully control it, which was harmful to the combat. Zhou Qin became more and more confused. He didn't know whether he should choose middle human-rank spiritual weapons or upper human-rank spiritual weapons. Therefore, these days, he would come to the Society of Spiritual Tattooists whenever he had time to carefully observe and choose various spiritual weapons. Unfortunately, he hadn't met one that satisfied him so far. Although there was still half a year to go before the examination in September, Zhou Qin still had a touch of anxiety in his heart. Nowadays, the practitioners who wanted to participate in the province test like him were all preparing themselves to improve their strength as much as possible. Because the province test was completely different from state test and county test. It not only tested the practitioner's aptitude and comprehension, but also his combat power. Aptitude and comprehension didn't matter. What mattered was combat. No matter how strong a practitioner's aptitude was, if his fighting capacity was too weak, he would not be able to pass the province test. What was the test of battle? The most fundamental was naturally cultivation. Apart from that, the combat techniques, combat experience, weapons, and equipment were all important factors that affected a battle. Zhou Qin did not lack cultivation techniques, nor did he lack combat experience and technique. He only lacked combat weapons. A handy and powerful weapon could even play an important role in reversing the situation and turning defeat into victory. Therefore, Zhou Qin did not dare to be careless at this point. After entering the commune of spiritual tattooists, Zhou Qin walked to the task area without waiting for the attendant. A few days ago, he posted a refining task here, hoping that a spiritual tattooist could make a suitable spiritual weapon for him. "Young Master Zhou, you're here." A maid in charge of reception in the mission area greeted Zhou Qin naturally when she saw him. Zhou Qin had come almost every day during this period of time, and the servant girl had long since become familiar with him. "How is it?" Zhou Qin showed an expectant look. The maid shook her head and said, "I'm sorry to make you come here in vain again. There are only 9 spiritual tattooists in the commune who are permanently stationed here. But recently, for some unknown reason, the number of practitioners issuing tasks for refining weapons suddenly increased by several times, which overwhelmed the spiritual tattooists in the commune and made them unable to accept more tasks." Although Zhou Qin had already known this result, he still couldn't help feeling disappointed. He also knew that the reason why the number of practitioners posting refining tasks increased these days was that the province test would begin in half a year. Many practitioners who wanted to participate in the province test had to prepare in advance. After all, refining weapons was not a simple thing. There were even frequent risks of failure, and it took a long time. Even if the weapon was successfully refined, it would take a while for the practitioner to adapt and master the refined spiritual weapon. Under such circumstances, it was not an exaggeration to start preparing half a year in advance. "How long do you think it will take for the task I posted to be accepted?" Zhou Chen asked. "I don't know." The maid didn't dare to promise anything carelessly. Most of the tasks issued in the mission area were related to spiritual tattooists, whose status and identity were extremely lofty. Whether they would accept the task or not was not something that a maid like her could control. "Young master, why don't you go to the spiritual treasure area and have a look? Maybe you can pick out a suitable spiritual weapon," the maid suggested. "No need." Zhou Chen shook his head. He had already seen all kinds of spiritual weapons in the spiritual treasure area, and none of them was suitable for him. However, just as Zhou Chen was about to leave, a sudden noise came from afar. "You don't have to fight for it. This snowfall saber is mine." "Humph, you can't say that. Since this treasure is consigned to auction, whoever offers the highest price will get it. Come on, continue bidding." "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Zhou Chen was stunned. The noise came from the spiritual treasure area. It seemed that they were fighting for a certain spiritual treasure. Zhou Chen suddenly became curious and couldn't help walking over. In the vast spirit treasure area, a group of practitioners surrounded one of the counters, blocking it so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. There were men and women, old and young. All of them stared at a saber behind the counter. Zhou Chen squeezed through the crowd and saw clearly that it was a snowfall saber, a common spiritual weapon of human rank on the market. There was nothing special about it. But when he saw the introduction next to the saber, Zhou Chen was shocked. It was 20% more powerful than the ordinary snowfall saber? How could it be possible? Zhou Chen couldn't believe it, but when he saw the name behind the introduction, he immediately believed it. The person who appraised this spiritual weapon was Chu Feng, the director of the Spiritual Tattooist Society. Chu Feng was a famous top spiritual tattooist in Mist City and the leader of the Spiritual Tattooist Society. How could a spiritual weapon appraised by him be fake? Now, Zhou Chen finally understood why so many practitioners were competing for this unique snowfall saber. A spiritual weapon of human rank with 20% more power than an ordinary one was simply unimaginable. "This is the weapon I need." Zhou Chen's eyes lit up. 700 silver coins. Humph, 800 silver coins. What a joke. I don't believe I can't get this saber. 900 silver coins. The bidding continued, which made Zhou Chen a little hesitant. Generally speaking, the price of a spiritual weapon of human rank on the market hovered between 200 and 400 silver coins, and some fine ones could be sold for about 500 silver coins. However, the snowfall warblade in front of him had actually been bid up to 900 silver. This was an extremely rare occurrence. Finally, Zhou Chen gritted his teeth and bid 1,000 silver coins. Suddenly, many practitioners present were in an uproar. The bidding just now had already reached a white-hot level. Everyone had estimated that the price would only be below 1,000 silver coins. Who would have thought that it would soar to 1,000 silver coins all of a sudden? Zhou Chen, who is quite famous in Mist College recently. It turns out to be him. I heard that he has been looking for a suitable spiritual weapon recently, but I didn't expect that he would also like this saber. Many practitioners recognized Zhou Chen's identity and were all surprised. As soon as Zhou Chen's bid came out, it immediately shocked everyone present. Many practitioners who were competing to bid could not help but change their mind. 1,000 silver coins were enough to buy a spiritual weapon of upper grade of human rank in excellent condition. In the end, the snowfall saber fell into Zhou Chen's hands, and he also paid 1,000 silver coins for it. But in Zhou Chen's view, it was absolutely worth it. Especially when he held the saber in his hand and looked at it, he increasingly felt that he had made the right choice this time. The mystery of this saber was not comparable to the ordinary snowfall saber at all. With this saber, I can smoothly pass the province test this time. Zhou Chen laughed and walked out of the Spiritual Tattooist Society. Shortly after Zhou Chen left, those practitioners who failed to buy a saber were unwilling to give up and asked one after another, "May I ask which spiritual tattooist made this saber?" "Yes, I saw a spiritual tattoo mark of Sun carved on the saber." "Is there a new, powerful spiritual tattooist?" "Do you still have this snowfall saber?" In the face of these inquiries, Jiazhen, who had just been in charge of the spiritual treasure area, had to explain in person, "To tell you the truth, this saber was indeed made by a new spiritual tattooist in the commune." Before he finished, he was interrupted by a clamor, "Cut the crap. Tell me the name of this spiritual tattooist. I want to issue a task of refining weapons and pay the same price for a snowfall saber." Jiazhen looked embarrassed. "Sorry, this Master Sun just arrived today. I'm not sure whether he will accept the task." Master Sun. Hearing this word, many practitioners became more and more excited. Master? Could it be a spiritual tattooist? Many practitioners couldn't help but turn around and rush to the task area. No matter who Master Sun was, they should issue the task first. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How could a spiritual tattooist, who could refine such a unique snowfall saber, be an ordinary person? Seeing this chaotic scene, Jiazhen was dumbfounded. Lin Sun's figure appeared in his mind. He sighed inwardly. No wonder Chu Feng wanted to keep it a secret. If these practitioners knew that this Master Sun was just a teenager, what would they think? On this day, the popularity of the task area of the commune of spiritual tattooists soared. In just 2 hours, there were hundreds of tasks, each of which was specially designated for Master Sun to accept. At the same time, the news that Master Sun of the commune of spiritual tattooists had refined a unique snowfall saber also spread like wildfire. It soon spread to Mist City and caused a great disturbance. Even Zhou Chen, who had bought the saber, had accidentally become a prominent figure in this matter. P.S. This time, the internet is cracking down on piracy. It is said that all the noveltyaba has been blocked. You can read books here. It's less than 5 yuan a month to read the original ones. Chapter 199. Lin Sun didn't know what happened in the commune of spiritual tattooists, but he was quite satisfied and felt the trip was worthwhile. After being certified as a primary spiritual tattooist, it would be much more convenient for him to make money in the future, and he didn't need to do everything by himself. Back home, Xu Jin, who was sleeping soundly, sat up and shouted, "Where's the wine?" "Of course I haven't forgotten." Lin Sun smiled and took out a jar of newly bought soul-burning wine from his storage ring and threw it to him. "It seems that you have gained a lot from this trip." Xu Jin glanced at Lin Sun. "Not bad. I don't need to run around anymore. I just need to refine spiritual weapons and sell them to the commune of spiritual tattooists for me." Lin Sun casually told Xu Jin about his experience in the commune of spiritual tattooists today. Who would have thought that Xu Jin would suddenly sneer? One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. "Kid, I have to remind you that since this Chu Feng dared to sign the Fiend God Spirit Book, he must be plotting something big." Lin Sun nodded. "I vaguely guessed it. I know how much I have to pay in order to get a big harvest." Xu Jin saw that Lin Sun had a plan, and said with a little emotion, "You will know that the most difficult thing to return in the world is a favor." He seemed to think of something in the past, shook his head dispiritedly, and fell asleep on the ground with the jar of wine in his arms. Looking at Shu Jin's figure, Lin Sun thought for a moment, and then turned around and walked into his room with a smile. A clear understanding of worldly affairs was knowledge, and a sophisticated understanding of human relationships was an article. Lin Sun knew that the so-called favor, when you cared about it, was heavier than a mountain; when you didn't care, it was less than a feather. If Chu Feng made some excessive demands one day in the future, Lin Sun naturally wouldn't agree foolishly. Of course, if it was within his power, Lin Sun wouldn't be stingy with his help. But these were all things in the future. At least for now, Lin Sun didn't worry about it. After entering the room, Lin Sun spent several hours to consume all the spiritual ink and spiritual materials he had purchased, and finally refined a snowfall saber, a blood bronze spear, and a pair of gale boot. The 3 spiritual weapons were all middle grade of human rank. Refined by Lin Sun, they were completely different from those sold in the market, and their power had been obviously improved. Lin Sun exhaled a long breath. With his current cultivation and soul power, he could only refine 3 spiritual weapons a day at most. Any more and he wouldn't be able to continue. What Lin Sun didn't know was that it was a miracle for a human gang-realmed spiritual tattooist like him to refine 3 spiritual weapons in just a few hours without any failure. It was almost impossible for other spiritual tattooists to achieve this step. Take the Snowfall Saber as an example. It would take an average spiritual tattooist 3 to 5 days to refine it, and he couldn't guarantee that he would fail. Such a comparison showed how terrifying and abnormal Lin Sun's attainments in spiritual tattoos were. On the one hand, it was because he had been learning spiritual tattoos from Master Lu since he was a child. On the other hand, it was because his cultivation foundation was so solid and his soul power was so strong that it provided a strong support for him when he was refining spiritual tattoos. But more importantly, the mysterious fluctuation from the gate to heaven ensured that Lin Sun had a perfect success rate every time he refined, and he had never failed at all. The most incredible thing was that the spiritual weapons refined by Lin Sun were obviously more powerful. All these factors combined made Lin Sun show a kind of unimaginable attainments and means in spiritual tattoos. Putting away the refined spiritual weapons, Lin Sun began to practice meditating magic and nature insight and spirit devour scripture as usual. When he left the bloodthirsty camp, he had just broken through the human gang realm. What he needed to do now was to further refine and consolidate his cultivation in order to prepare for the province test that would be held in half a year. Lin Sun was very clear that the practitioners who could participate in the province test were all powerful figures who had been screened layer by layer and fought their way out of thousands of soldiers and horses. It was no exaggeration to say that these practitioners who were qualified to participate in the province test were not ordinary at all. Under such circumstances, even if Lin Sun was confident in himself, he dared not to be careless. Late at night, after practicing, Lin Sun lay on the bed, but he didn't feel sleepy. He was thinking about what he needed to do next. Before the county test, I have to refine a set of weapons and equipment for myself, so that I can improve my combat effectiveness to the greatest extent. In addition, I also need to collect some information about the province test and analyze the combat effectiveness of the practitioners involved in it in order to know myself and the enemy. But the most urgent thing is to refine the cultivation of martial arts. I have just reached the human gang realm, so I must have a reference for the power I have mastered so that I can understand my own strength and shortcomings. Thinking like this, Lin Sun fell asleep after he had a clear direction in his mind. The next morning, Lin Sun pushed the door and left. The sky had just brightened when the spacious streets that were like spider webs that extended in all directions were already bustling with noise and excitement. There was an endless stream of people and carriages. Whoosh, a unique whistling sound came from the air. Lin Sun looked up and saw a spiritual tattoo shuttle with 18 carriages, winding like a long dragon, covered with brilliant spiritual light, driving into the distance from the void. Spiritual shuttle, a new type of shuttle developed by the Empire in recent years, could travel to and from every area of the city to meet people's travel need. Its body was covered with spiritual tattoos, with spiritual furnace as the power source and spiritual crystal as the raw material. It glided in the air. It was not only fast but also extremely stable and safe. Such a spiritual shuttle could accommodate thousands of people, which could greatly meet the needs of practitioners and ordinary people living at the bottom of society. Of course, if you wanted to take the spiritual shuttle, you had to pay money. This was the magic of spiritual tattooists. They used spiritual tattoos as a means to develop spiritual tools that could not only meet the needs of practitioners, but also had a wide impact on the secular society. For example, although the two inventions, spiritual screen and spiritual shuttle, seemed to be of little use to practitioners, they undoubtedly had a great impact and promotion on the secular world of the Empire, which could be called a pioneering undertaking in history. Lin Sun watched the row of spiritual shuttles leave and couldn't help sighing with emotion. The role of spiritual tattooists to the whole empire was absolutely immeasurable, which might be one of the important reasons why spiritual tattooists had such a high status and identity. It didn't take long for Lin Sun to come to the commune of spiritual tattooists. As soon as he entered the door, he was recognized by Skylark, the beautiful maid he saw yesterday, who welcomed him warmly at once. After a little inquiry, Lin Sun knew that this was arranged by Chu Feng, so he accepted it calmly and asked, "Has the snowfall saber I consigned yesterday been sold?" Skylark glanced around quickly and said in a low voice, "Child Sun, this is not the place to talk. Please follow me to the second floor." Lin Sun was stunned. Was it necessary to be so mysterious? But soon, he vaguely understood. When he passed through the spiritual treasure area, he saw dense figures of practitioners standing there and talking loudly, which was extremely lively. And the topic they were talking about was obviously related to the snowfall saber. "Brother, I want to ask whether the snowfall saber, refined by Master Sun yesterday, is sold here?" "Brother, don't tell me you also come for Master Sun?" "Haha, look at the practitioners in the spiritual treasure area. 80% of them have heard that Master Sun has come to the commune of spiritual tattooists, and has superb attainments in spiritual tattoos, so they all come to join in the fun. Damn, there are so many people. The competition is too big. Alas, yes, I don't know who this Master Sun is. I heard that Zhou Chun from Mist College got a great bargain. He only spent 1,000 imperial silver coins to buy an amazing and unique snowfall saber. It's really enviable. Damn, 1,000 imperial silver coins is nothing. If I were here yesterday, how could Zhou Chun get such a bargain?" These discussions all revolved around Master Sun and Snowfall Saber, which was extremely lively. Seeing this, Lin Sun understood that the Snowfall Saber he consigned yesterday was sold at a high price of 1,000 imperial silver coins. And it seemed that because of this saber, he was crowned with the title of Master Sun, which attracted the attention of many practitioners in Mist City. This situation was beyond Lin Sun's expectation. "Brother, are you also waiting for Master Sun to consign a spiritual weapon? I advise you not to wait. There are too many people. You'd better leave quickly." When Lin Sun appeared in the spiritual treasure area, a man frowned and said. Obviously, he thought that Lin Sun's arrival was equal to one more competitor. "Oh, thank you for reminding me." Lin Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and walked forward. "Another competitor has been driven away." Seeing this, the man couldn't help but say proudly. If he knew that the one he had driven away was Master Sun, no one knew how he would feel. When Lin Sun passed by the task area, he couldn't help but be stunned. There were also a large number of practitioners gathered here, and it was even more lively than the spiritual treasure area. "Help me issue a task. I want a spiritual weapon made by Master Sun. As long as I'm satisfied, money is not a problem." Damn, what bad luck. Why is there another guy asking for a task from Master Sun? How many are there already? Look, all the tasks issued in the task area today are about looking for Master Sun. If I had known it earlier, I would have queued up yesterday. Hearing these comments, Lin Sun's expression suddenly became a little strange. Until he walked to the second floor of the commune of spiritual tattooists and was led into a quiet and elegant room by Skylark, he couldn't help asking, "Skylark, how could this be?" Before Skylark could answer, a hearty laughter came from outside the door. "Skylark can't answer this question." As he said, Chu Feng, who was dressed in a fine brocade robe and trimmed his mustache, walked in leisurely, looking elegant and romantic. P.S. Some people said that they couldn't find Mr. Big in the WeChat official account. Goldfish said that after entering the official account of Goldfish, click on the top right corner of the mobile phone and then check the history. Chapter 200. As soon as Chu Feng came, Skylark quietly left the elegant room. Chu Feng was straightforward and soon told the whole story to Lin Sun. In fact, there were many reasons why there was such a hot situation today. First of all, the commune of spiritual tattooists had a great influence. Everything that happened here would be noticed by many people. Secondly, the snowfall saber refined by Lin was so unique that it couldn't be bought in the market at all. Once such an unprecedented rare spiritual weapon appeared, it could be imagined what a sensation it would cause. Thirdly, the province test would begin in September, half a year later. Recently, the number of practitioners who came to the commune of spiritual tattooists to buy spiritual weapons showed a skyrocketing trend. After all, there was only one commune of spiritual tattooists in Mist City in the whole southwestern province. Many practitioners who were qualified to take part in the province test all hoped to buy weapons and equipment from the commune of spiritual tattooists to prepare for the province test. Under such circumstances, when they learned that a new Master Sun could refine a unique and powerful spiritual weapon, it would naturally attract great attention. After learning all this, Lin Sun immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He had thought that his identity had been leaked, but now it seemed that he had worried too much. This is the proceeds from the sale of the snowfall saber yesterday. The commune takes 10% of it, and the remaining 900 imperial silver coins are yours. Chu Feng took out a storage ring and handed it to Lin. This storage ring is the small Sumeru spiritual ring refined by the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire. It's also a gift for you. Lin was surprised. This small Sumeru spiritual ring was extremely famous. It was said that a spiritual tattoo master in the Academy of Spiritual Implements personally refined it 100 years ago. He collected dozens of extremely rare void spiritual jades and finally refined 100 small Sumeru spiritual rings after 3 years. This ring not only had the function of storage, but also could cleanse the mind, nourish the spirit, and regulate the qi. It was extremely mysterious. As soon as these 100 small Sumeru spiritual rings came out, they were sold out by the upper class of the empire at the first time. They were not circulated in the market at all. Furthermore, due to the fact that some of the spirit materials used to forge this spirit ring had already gone extinct, no similar spirit ring had ever been forged. In other words, these 100 small Sumeru spirit rings had become peerless items. To those important figures of the empire, being able to wear such a ring was a symbol of status and power, and its significance had long since changed. Under such circumstances, it could be imagined how surprised Lin Sun was that Chu Feng took out such a peerless treasure to give to him. Lin refused again and again, but Chu Feng insisted and said in a resolute manner, "If you don't accept it, I will destroy it right in front of you." In the end, Lin Sun could not dissuade Chu Feng, so he accepted it. But he knew clearly that he owed Chu Feng a lot more. "Brother, you don't have to think too much about it. I definitely don't have any ulterior motives for doing this. Just treat it as a greeting gift from me. My goal is only to prove that I truly don't treat you as an outsider." Chu Feng's smile was warm and his words were sincere and serious. "Thank you, Senior. Lin Sun cupped his hands. Chu Feng pretended to be angry and said, "Why are you still calling me senior? Isn't that too distant? Friendship between gentlemen doesn't matter age. We only seek to understand each other. From now on, you can just call me old brother." "Then I'll take the liberty of calling you big brother," Lin Sun said with a smile. He had to admire that Chu Feng was absolutely a first-class master of the ways of the world. At least, Lin Sun could not resist Chu Feng at all. "Ha ha, great. It's like old friends at first sight." Chu Feng laughed heartily with a look of extreme joy. Lin Sun also laughed, but he suddenly thought of Shu Jin's words. The most difficult thing to return in the world was a favor. Immediately, Lin Sun abandoned this idea. He had thought it through yesterday, so he would not be confused by this problem again. "Old brother, these are the 3 spiritual weapons I refined yesterday. Please appraise them. If they are suitable, just put them up for sale in the spiritual treasure area like yesterday." Lin Sun took out the snowfall saber, the blood bronze spear and the storm boots, and handed them to Chu Feng. Chu Feng's eyes brightened, and he gladly took them over to appraise. When he confirmed the power of these 3 spiritual weapons, Chu Feng could not help but slightly squint his eyes, and a touch of shock arose in his heart. Just like the snowfall saber yesterday, the power was obviously a notch higher, and these 3 spiritual weapons were all the same. "Old brother, you really open my eyes. Your extraordinary attainments in spiritual tattoos are enough to be amazing and unparalleled." Chu Feng did not hide his appreciation, and the way he looked at Lin Sun changed slightly, with more sincere admiration. "Old brother, you flatter me too much." Lin Sun smiled bitterly. "Ha ha." Chu Feng laughed again and said, "I'll deal with these 3 spiritual weapons. Do you have any other plans, old brother?" Lin Sun thought for a while and said, "I just want to make more money to maintain my cultivation. Old brother, do you have any suggestions?" Chu Feng said without hesitation, "It's easy. You just saw the lively situation in the spiritual treasure area and the task area. I suggest you take some tasks in the task area while refining spiritual weapons." "Take tasks?" Lin Sun was surprised. "Yes. Every time you finish a task, you will get not only the reward, but also the points awarded by the commune. The more points you have, the more convenience and privileges you can enjoy." Chu Feng said quickly, "Of course, these have no practical benefits for you, old brother. But the points have another value, which is to exchange items. The spiritual weapons, spiritual materials, and all kinds of treasures in the Spiritual Tattooist Society can be exchanged with point." After a pause, he continued, "The most important thing is that the Spiritual Tattooist Society has its own unique channels, which can provide spiritual tattooists with all kinds of spiritual materials that can't be bought in the market. This is the most attractive part of the points exchange." Lin Sun couldn't help being moved by Chu Feng's words and asked, "How can I take this kind of task?" Chu Feng stood up with a smile and said, "I'll ask Skylark to help you later. You just need to choose the task you want to take." Lin Sun nodded. Before long, Chu Feng called Skylark and took Lin Sun out of the elegant room. They entered a secret room on the 2nd floor specially prepared for spiritual tattooists. The antique furnishings in the secret room made the environment quiet and quiet. "Child, these are the tasks issued by the task area. They are divided into 9 stars according to the degree of difficulty. 1-star tasks are the simplest and 9-star tasks are the most difficult." Skylark pointed to a bronze wall at the back of the secret room. The wall was branded with spiritual tattoos, and a huge light curtain emerged. Lines of tasks flashed like flowing water in the light curtain. Behind each task, there were different numbers of star marks, representing the degree of difficulty of the task. "Now there are 371 tasks for you to take, most of which are 2-star refining tasks," Skylark said quickly. 2-star refining tasks generally require you to refine middle-grade spiritual weapons of human rank. You can choose tasks from them to complete according to your preference. Lin Sun nodded and glanced at it casually. He took a fancy to a 2-star refining task. This was a task to refine a cyan rainbow spiritual sword. The practitioner who issued the task had provided 3 sets of spiritual materials, and the reward was 1,000 imperial silver coins. After completing the task, Lin Sun would get 5 points from the Spiritual Tattooist Society. "That's it," Lin Sun said. "Please wait a moment, child." Skylark nodded and went straight to the bronze wall. He reached out and gently touched the light curtain. With a buzzing sound, the 2-star crafting task turned into a rain of light and disappeared. A moment later, there was a knock on the door. A servant brought in the spiritual materials needed for the task and then left quietly. Skylark put these spiritual materials on the table and said, "Child, do you want to start refining now?" Lin Sun looked at the table and saw a row of various inscribing pens prepared for him. He nodded and said, "Let's start now." He picked an inscribing pen, dipped it in spiritual ink, and began to inscribe on a long sword. This long sword was an ordinary weapon, which was equivalent to a carrier. Its material was specially prepared for refining the cyan rainbow spiritual sword. What Lin Sun needed to do was to inscribe spiritual tattoos on it, and finally make the long sword transform into a middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank. Generally speaking, a low-grade spiritual weapon of human rank would be inscribed with no more than 9 spiritual tattoos. A middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank would be inscribed with no more than 18 spiritual tattoos. A high-grade spiritual weapon of human rank would be inscribed with no more than 36 spiritual tattoos. A top-grade spiritual weapon of human rank would be inscribed with no more than 108 spiritual tattoos. This also meant that the level of a spiritual weapon was closely related to the number of spiritual tattoos inscribed on it, and the level of a spiritual weapon would directly affect its power. For example, the cyan rainbow spiritual sword Lin Sun was refining at the moment needed to inscribe 33 spiritual tattoos containing different mysteries on it. It was an excellent spiritual weapon of middle-grade human rank. Once he started to refine, Lin Sun's mind suddenly became tranquil, ethereal and calm. His expression was focused and serious, and his movements were smooth and skillful. Skylark waited quietly on one side, holding her breath and concentrating, for fear of disturbing Lin Sun. But when she occasionally looked at Lin Sun, she couldn't help but show a luster of admiration. It was unimaginable for Skylark that a teenager had the attainments of a primary spiritual tattooist. It was really amazing. Skylark sighed with emotion in her heart. While Lin Sun was inscribing spiritual tattoos, an excited scream suddenly sounded in the task area on the first floor of the commune of spiritual tattooists. "God! Master Sun took the task I issued. Ha 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 ha!" Many practitioners crowded in the task area couldn't help but burst into an uproar. After waiting for a long time, the mysterious Master Sun finally took action. Many people couldn't help but look at the lucky one, who was selected by Master Sun, with envy and jealousy on their faces. Chapter 201. The task area was boiling all of a sudden. Master Sun's action gave hope to many practitioners who had been waiting here after issuing tasks. They were looking forward to what kind of unique work Master Sun would refine this time. "Damn it, Wang Lin, you're so lucky this time." Someone was jealous and said sourly. The practitioner called Wang Lin was a dignified man. He was the one who issued the task just now, and Lin Sun took it. "Humph, that's not necessarily true. We just heard that Master Sun is very powerful. As for how powerful he is, no one knows. Wang Lin, don't be too happy." Some people deliberately said sarcastic words to provoke Wang Lin. Wang Lin just listened with a smile and didn't refute them. In his view, these guys were all jealous. "Wang Lin, how many sets of spiritual materials have you prepared this time?" A friend who had a good relationship with Wang Lin couldn't help asking. This question was extremely critical. It was common for spiritual tattooists to fail when refining spiritual weapons. Therefore, when refining spiritual weapons, they would prepare more sets of spiritual materials as backup. 3 sets. Wang Lin said casually. 3 sets? That's a little less. But with Master Sun's extraordinary attainments, his failure rate should not be too high. Hearing his friend's words, Wang Lin felt a little uneasy. He knew very well that the more unique and powerful the spiritual weapon was, the higher the failure rate would be. Who cares? I'll prepare more sets when the spiritual materials are not enough. Wang Lin pretended to be free and easy. In fact, he had begun to calculate how much he would have to pay if he prepared more sets of spiritual materials. After all, the value of the spiritual materials needed to refine a middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank was not as simple as it seemed. In the midst of the discussion, more than an hour had passed unknowingly. During this time, the practitioners who came to the commune of spiritual tattooists heard that Master Sun had begun to accept refining tasks, so the number of practitioners gathered in the task area was increasing. As the lucky one, in everyone's eyes, Wang Lin received more and more attention, which made him feel a little pressure. Everyone was waiting to see what kind of middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank Master Sun could refine this time. Would it be as unique as the snowfall saber yesterday? Was it a well-deserved reputation, or was it just an undeserved reputation? Ding! Suddenly, a melodious voice rang out, causing the eyes of many practitioners present to light up. This was the sound of a mission being completed. Not long after, everyone saw a maid carrying a rectangular jade box hurriedly arrive and hand it over to the person in charge of the mission area. This person in charge was an old man. His figure was withered, and his expression was grave and stern. Those who were familiar with the old man knew that his name was Guan Pingu. Guan Pingchao looked at the jade box and said in a deep voice, "Mission number 37 has been completed. If the person who issued the mission is present, you can claim the item now." Number 37? Many Xiuzha stilled. Wang Lin was also a bit surprised, but he quickly reacted and said, Yes, I was the one who issued the mission." As he spoke, he rushed over, took out the mission certificate, and handed it to Guan Pingu. At this moment, the audience was in an uproar. In just over an hour, Master Sun had completed this middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank? This speed of refining spirit artifacts was simply too inconceivable. The reason why they hesitated just now was that they didn't expect that the mission number 37 was related to Wang Lin. After all, it was only more than an hour from receiving the mission to completing it. Who could imagine that Master Sun had completed a work in such a short time? At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Wang Lin. Looking at the jade box in his hand, their eyes were full of curiosity. To their disappointment, Wang Lin obviously didn't want his treasure to be seen by others. Under the guidance of Guan Pingu, he entered a secret chamber. As a result, instead of dispelling their curiosity, it made them more and more unbearable. It didn't take long for Wang Lin to come out. At this moment, his expression was strange. He seemed to be shocked, surprised, and ecstatic. He seemed to be suppressing his inner excitement, but the unconcealable joy between his eyebrows still betrayed him. "How is it? Wang Lin, why don't you take out your treasure to show us?" "Yes, let's see Master Sun's work." Many practitioners couldn't help but yell. "Everyone, I can only tell you that Master Sun is more than just worthy of his name. In my opinion, his attainments in spiritual tattoos are absolutely beyond all your expectations." "I can't believe it." Wang Lin took a few deep breaths in succession and said with a trace of admiration in his eyes. The audience was in an uproar. What kind of work could make Wang Lin so satisfied and admire it so much? Unfortunately, when they wanted to ask, Wang Lin had already left in a hurry. He completed a middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank in 1 hour and 36 minutes. And judging from Wang Lin's happy look, This spiritual weapon is probably as unique and powerful as the snowfall saber yesterday. Someone analyzed calmly. In this way, Master Sun completed the task at one time, and there was no possibility of failure at all? Many practitioners were also lost in thought. If the rumor about Master Sun yesterday was exaggerated, at this moment, after witnessing what happened to Wang Lin, everyone thoroughly realized that Master Sun's attainments in spiritual tattoos were absolutely unfathomable. Right at this moment, a loud shout that was filled with excitement resounded from afar. What? 3 works of Master Sun are consigned for sale in the spiritual treasure area? I must get one this time. Suddenly, a group of practitioners in the task area looked at each other, and then they subconsciously stepped forward and rushed to the spiritual treasure area. When they arrived at the spiritual treasure area, they saw that the spacious area was now crowded with people. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a sea of people. I'm Jiazhen, in charge of the spiritual treasure area. Please don't crowd. If you cause a disturbance, you'll bear the consequences. Seeing that the scene was somewhat out of control, Jiazhen had to stand up to maintain order. He smiled bitterly at this moment. How could he expect that the 3 spiritual weapons from Master Sun would be so popular? Cut the crap. Hurry up and tell us the base price. Yes, I'll get a spiritual weapon from Master Sun today, even if I have to sell everything I have. Sell everything you have? I think you'd better give up. There was a lot of discussion. Before the bidding started, the atmosphere was full of gunpowder. Those practitioners who came from the task area were dumbfounded when they saw such a scene. What did it mean to be popular? That was it. On the same day, a snowfall saber, a blood copper spear, and a pair of gale boots refined by Lin Sun were sold at the sky-high prices of 1,300, 1,600, and 1,000 imperial silver coins respectively, which shocked the whole audience. The news, like a storm, quickly spread to Mist City and caused another uproar. The price of a middle-grade spiritual weapon of human rank on the market was generally between 200 to 300 imperial silver coins. Even the most expensive one could only sell for about 600 imperial silver coins. However, now the middle-grade spiritual weapon refined by Master Sun was sold at a sky-high price of more than 1,000 imperial silver coins, which was too amazing in itself. The most incredible thing was that every spiritual weapon refined by Master Sun could be sold at a price of more than 1,000 imperial silver coins, which was really amazing. What did it mean? It meant that the spiritual weapon refined by Master Sun was indeed unique and magical. Otherwise, it would be impossible to sell it at such a sky-high price. All this added a mysterious aura to the name of Master Sun, which once again attracted the attention of many people. Even some spiritual tattooists in Mist City couldn't sit still and began to pay attention to all this. Master Sun? Who on earth was this guy? How could he set off such a storm in Mist City in just 2 days? In any case, the sudden appearance of Master Sun in the commune of spiritual tattooists was like a comet across the sky of Mist City. In just 2 days, he attracted too much attention and became a mysterious figure. When Lin Sun finished 2 refining tasks in succession, he decided not to continue. With his current strength, if he refined 3 middle-grade spiritual weapons in a row, he would run out of strength, which was not worth the loss. When leaving the commune of spiritual tattooists, Chu Feng told Lin about the sensational events that happened in the task area and the spiritual treasure area today, which surprised Lin Sun. But then he frowned. People were afraid of being famous as pigs were afraid of being fat. He didn't want to attract too much attention. From tomorrow on, I plan to only take on tasks in the task area, 2 a day. Lin Sun thought for a moment and made a decision. Chu Feng nodded and agreed without hesitation. After leaving the commune of spiritual tattooists, Lin Sun went straight home. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Shu Jin sitting at the stone table in the middle of the courtyard, drinking alone. Seeing Lin Sun, Shu Jin said directly, "Boy, are you the Master Sun who has been spreading around the city these days?" Lin Sun was surprised. "You know it too?" Shu Jin said, "Of course, I'm not deaf. How can I not know it? Do you know that in this way your situation will become very dangerous?" With a rare seriousness on his face, he said, "A spiritual tattooist who suddenly appears and has a unique attainment in the field of spiritual tattoos will definitely attract the attention of countless people. I can even tell you that many forces have sent spies to find out your background." Lin Sun's expression also became serious. Shu Jin continued, "Whether they are kind or malicious, once you are targeted by these forces, your situation will only become troublesome and full of variables." Lin Sun was about to say something when Shu Jin said, "Don't count on the commune of spiritual tattooists. There are many ways to find out your details. Remember, never put your hope on others." Lin Sun was silent for a moment and asked, "Old Jin, what do you think I should do?" Shu Jin suddenly laughed mischievously and resumed his mischievous appearance. He stretched out a finger and wagged it. Lin Sun said, "A vat of soul-burning liquor? Deal." Shu Jin shook his head. "No, it's a vat of soul-burning liquor every day." Lin Sun was stunned and said, "Okay." Shu Jin stretched himself and said, "From tomorrow on, you continue to do your own things. Don't worry about other things." At the end of his words, he was lying in the corner and sleeping like a lazy drunkard. Lin Sun smiled knowingly. He knew that Shu Jin finally decided to take action. Chapter 202. Returning to his room, Lin Sun began to count today's harvest. A peerless treasure, small summer ring, could hold a mountain of 300 meters in its inner space. With this ring, it could cleanse the mind, nurture the spirit, and regulate the qi. Lin Sun checked it carefully to make sure that the ring was not tampered with. Then he moved all his belongings into the ring. What was rare was that this small summer ring was simple and unadorned, like a piece of black jade. It was hard for people who didn't know it to recognize that it was a peerless treasure. In addition, Lin Sun also gained 54 gold coins today, which were all the rewards he got after consigning 3 spiritual weapons and accepting 2 refining tasks. Of course, this was the reward after the commune of spiritual tattooists took 10% of the fees. Earning 54 gold coins in one day was already an extremely rich income, which was equivalent to 5,400 silver coins. Finally, there were 10 points given by the commune of spiritual tattooists. Lin Sun knew that such a point could be exchanged for 3 gold coins, which was extremely valuable. Of course, Lin Sun wouldn't exchange it for money. He could exchange the points for other treasures such as spiritual weapons, equipment, and spiritual materials in the commune of spiritual tattooists, which was a privilege that only spiritual tattooists could enjoy. After counting all these, Lin Sun took a deep breath, got rid of distractions, and began to cultivate. The purpose of making money in the commune of spiritual tattooists was to better maintain the needs of cultivation. Lin Sun would not neglect the essentials for the sake of making money. In addition, the registration for the province test would begin in more than 10 days. Lin Sun intended to take advantage of this time to temper his cultivation. While Lin Sun was cultivating, Chu Feng sat quietly with his legs crossed in the deepest adytum on the second floor of the commune of spiritual tattooists. Everyone in the commune of spiritual tattooists knew that this adytum was a forbidden area for Chu Feng. No one was allowed to enter except him. However, at this time, there was a weak and slender figure sitting cross-legged in front of Chu Feng. The room was dark and the sight was dim. Only a girl with a soft and beautiful face could be vaguely seen. She sat there with her legs crossed, hands hanging down on her knees, and kept silent. In the dark and quiet adytum, Chu Feng and a girl sat opposite to each other. This scene seemed a bit strange and mysterious. After a long time, Chu Feng broke the silence. "Anyway, I have to have a try. There is only one chance, and I can't miss it again." His voice was low, without the usual warmth. Ching, I can't forget what happened in those years. I can't forget the pain those guys brought us. There was a touch of coldness in Chu Feng's eyes. Ching sighed and said, Brother, do you think a teenager can be relied on? His eyes and his fanatical voice, I've been immersed in spiritual tattoos for so many years and I have seen many geniuses. I have to say, Lin Sun. Ching said with a sigh, Brother Ching, I will to say. Tu Feng. His eyes were burning and his voice was fanatical. I have been immersed in spiritual tattoos for so many years and have seen all kinds of geniuses. But until I met Lin Sun, I found that all the geniuses I had seen before were just a bunch of rubbish. Looking at Chu Feng, who had always been calm, showing a rare fanatical expression at this moment, Ching couldn't help but wonder if the young man was really so extraordinary. Of course, he is still young, and he lacks real power and momentum. But I can wait for him to rise step by step. Chu Feng took a deep breath, and his eyes were firm and decisive. I believe that with his wisdom and aptitude, he will definitely have a meteoric rise in the future and become an influential figure who can really look down upon the whole world. When he spoke up to hear, he gazed at the young woman before him, and he revealed a wisp of pity as he said, At that time, we'll have hope to take revenge, and you don't have to hide in the darkness like you're doing right now. Ching seemed to be a little excited, but then she smiled bitterly. Brother, I'm afraid that the young man will change at that time. Are you sure he will help us? Chu Feng was silent for a moment and said, So what if I'm not sure? This is our only chance. If we don't seize it, our situation will only become more and more dangerous in the future. Ching couldn't help asking, Brother, why don't you tell him all this directly? Chu Feng shook his head, Not now. If I tell him now, he will only be vigilant against me. After all, we are strangers to him. If I suddenly make such a request, do you think he will agree? Ching sighed faintly, and her mood was complicated. Ching, you don't have to think about it. Leave everything to me. In my opinion, when he really becomes a big shot who can look down upon the whole world, what we are doing will just be a piece of cake for him. Chu Feng comforted her with a smile. Ching nodded, Brother, I don't think it's good to scheme against others. You must be honest with him in the future. An excellent young man like him must hate being deceived the most. Chu Feng nodded and stood up. Ching, have a good rest. I'm going to do something. He pushed the door and went out, leaving the girl's delicate figure in the dark secret room. The moment he walked out of the secret room, Chu Feng regained his former elegant and romantic appearance. His every movement was calm and elegant. Before long, Chu Feng walked into another secret room. There were already people waiting here, including an old man who was as thin as a bamboo pole, a young man who looked simple and honest, and a woman who was dressed in an enchanting and carefree manner. When they saw Chu Feng come in, the three of them all stood up with a trace of respect on their faces. Old Diao, Xiong-san, Yen Mei, sorry to keep you waiting. Chu Feng greeted them with a smile and said, This time, I called you here because I have a favor to ask. The old man called Old Diao nodded and said, Brother Chu Feng, just say it. Your business is our business. Chu Feng said, Then I'll be straightforward. This time, I need you to help me protect a person. Don't let his identity be revealed. Protect a person? Old Diao, Xiong-san and Yen Mei were all stunned. They thought it was something dangerous, but they never thought it was just to protect a person. It was too simple. Yes, the key is to ensure that his life is not disturbed by others. Chu Feng said solemnly, This matter is of utmost importance to me, so I ask for everyone's help. Old Diao said, So, even if we protect him, we have to hide in the dark and can't directly interfere with his life? Chu Feng praised, Exactly. Well, leave it to us. Old Diao agreed after thinking for a while. In the following days, Lin Sun went to the commune of spiritual tattooists in the morning. After completing 2 refining tasks, he would return home to practice. His days were full and peaceful. However, for the commune of spiritual tattooists, since the reputation of Master Sun spread, a large number of practitioners came every day recently, which made the commune of spiritual tattooists very lively. Unfortunately, Lin Sun only took 2 refining tasks every day, and all of them were refining middle-grade spiritual weapons of human rank, which made many practitioners sigh in disappointment. However, many practitioners keenly found that as long as Master Sun took the task, he almost never failed, and the spiritual weapons he refined were all unique and exquisite, obviously more powerful than the same spiritual weapons on the market. In this way, the image of Master Sun became more and more lofty in the hearts of many practitioners, and the discussion about the identity of Master Sun also became one of the hot topics. Some people confidently swore that Master Sun was an extraordinary person who had taught in the Green Deer School of the Empire in the early years. The reason why he came to Mist City was that he had a special relationship with Chu Feng, the director of the commune of spiritual tattooists. Others refuted that Master Sun was a big shot from the 3 great families of spiritual tattoos in the Empire, and this time he came to Mist City to see Miss Lu Qingyan, the famous artistic practitioner. Of course, this statement was even more absurd. After all, almost everyone in Mist City now knew that Lu Qingyan would arrive in Mist City in 2 or 3 months. In short, there were various discussions about the identity of Master Sun, but no one could be sure which one was true. This was the influence. Lin Sun didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard these rumors. For him, this kind of fame and reputation was definitely a burden. He would rather make money quietly than admit that this Master Sun had something to do with him. Occasionally, Lin Sun also wondered why he had been so quiet during this period. It seemed that no one would make every effort to investigate his details, as Shu Jin said. But after thinking about it, Lin Sun understood that it might be Shu Jin who helped him resolve many invisible spies in the dark, which made his life so peaceful. When he returned home one day, Lin Sun saw Shu Jin lying in the corner and sleeping soundly. He couldn't help but say, "Old Jin, these days." Shu Jin, who was sleeping, suddenly hiccuped and interrupted, "Just concentrate on your cultivation. Why do you care about these things?" Hearing this, Lin Sun smiled. He finally confirmed that it must be Shu Jin's contribution behind all this peace. Shu Jin suddenly added, "That Chu Feng really took care of you in every possible way. He even sent 3 people to protect you in the dark. However, they were all driven away by me. With their strength, they are destined to be of no use when a real expert comes." Lin Sun was stunned. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I see. This is a favor." Shu Jin sighed with emotion and turned over to continue sleeping. Lin Sun said thoughtfully, "Old Jin, have you ever suffered a loss in a favor?" Shu Jin didn't seem to hear it. He snored like thunder. But Lin Sun was keenly aware that when he asked this question, Old Jin's body stiffened imperceptibly. It seems that this guy is also a man with a story. Lin Sun sighed in his heart and turned into his room. The registration for the province test would begin tomorrow in Mist College. Lin Sun had to prepare in advance. Chapter 203. While Lin Sun was preparing for the registration of the province test, Chu Feng was listening to Old Yao's report in the Society of Spiritual Tattooists. "We have followed that child secretly for more than 10 days, but we found that it was unnecessary." Old Yao's voice was a little bitter. Next to him, Xiong San and Yen Mei also looked quite depressed. Chu Feng narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Old Yao seemed to think of something with a deep fear on his face, "Because there is a great man beside that child who has been protecting him." "Great man?" Chu Feng was surprised. "Yes, the great man's strength is unfathomable. We even suspect that if this great man wants to harm us, he can take down the 3 of us with one blow." Old Yao's voice was a little heavy. It took a great deal of courage for a strong man to admit that he was far inferior to others. Chu Feng was shocked. He was very clear about the strength of Old Yao and the other 2. Old Diao seemed to be just a thin and ordinary old man, but he himself had the cultivation of sea spirit realm. At the same time, Xiong San and Yen Mei were also extremely powerful. Both of them were at the peak of Heavengang realm, only one step away from sea spirit realm. In the Mist City, 3 strong men like them were almost invincible as long as they didn't meet the strong practitioners of sea spirit realm. But now Old Diao said that there was a more terrifying great man beside Lin Sun, who even made Old Diao feel afraid. This was too incredible. Chu Feng couldn't calm down. He suddenly found that the origin of Lin Sun seemed to be more complicated than he thought. Then can you see what cultivation this great man has? Chu Feng took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice. It can't be as simple as sea spirit realm, Old Diao said decisively. Chu Feng was shocked and said involuntarily, could it be a strong practitioner of Tao Insight realm? Old Diao shook his head, it can't be determined. But in the past 10 days we have found a lot of things secretly. Let Xiong San tell us. Chu Feng suppressed the shock in his heart and looked at Xiong San. The sturdy and honest young man named Xiong San said in a deep voice, 13 days ago, Sun's business in Mist City sent 2 strong practitioners of Gang Spirit Realm as spies, but they were knocked out and sent back to Sun's business in the second half of the night. One of them was left with a line of blood, which read, if you run around like a dog again, I'll cut off your heads to go with wine. Chu Feng's eyelids twitched and he sneered. I know that Sun's business can't sit still. Last time they poached a spiritual tattooist from the commune of spiritual tattooists. They thought they did it secretly, but they didn't know that I was too lazy to care about it. This time they actually want to play the same trick again. They deserve to be taught a lesson. Xiong San continued, 12 days ago, Azure Light Pavilion sent a strong practitioner of Sea Spirit Realm to approach that child, but he was seriously injured and fell into a coma on the way. When he was sent back to Azure Light Pavilion, he also carried a blood letter, which read, how dare a lowly person shake a tree? Chu Feng's expression changed slightly. Azure Light Pavilion was a first-class force in Mist City. It controlled more than 10 spiritual minds and was rich and overbearing. Unexpectedly, they also targeted Lin Sun. 9 days ago, Tianxiang Building sent 3 strong practitioners of Gang Spirit Realm. 5 days ago, the Imperial Xiling Army Camp in Mist City sent 2 strong practitioners of Sea Spirit Realm. 2 days ago, Mist College sent a spiritual tattooist of Sea Spirit Realm, Xiong San reported rapidly. Chu Feng's heart trembled with every piece of news he reported, and the expression in his eyes changed. Later, when he heard that the camp of Xiling Army and Mist College also sent out strong practitioners, Chu Feng could no longer keep calm, and his face was extremely gloomy. All this was beyond his expectation. He never thought that the name of Master Sun would attract so many forces' attention. At the same time, the strength of the man beside Lin Sun also shocked Chu Feng. The forces sent by each force were all defeated and returned in frustration. If that was the case, then how powerful was this expert? Finally, Xiong San said bitterly, just today, the 3 of us were also warned by the man that our existence was completely superfluous. If we appeared again, he would not be polite to us. Chu Feng was stunned, and his expression changed constantly. He finally realized that everything he had done seemed to have been seen by the overmatch beside Lin Sun. Did the man say anything else? Chu Feng couldn't help asking. Old Diao, Xiong San and Yen Mei shook their heads. Chu Feng suddenly felt a little worried. If the man had already seen through his mind, why didn't he point it out? If he didn't see through it, how could he know that Old Diao and others were sent by him? Chu Feng's mood suddenly became tangled. He finally decided to find a time to have a good talk with Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't know all this. Early the next morning, Lin Sun walked out of the room in high spirit. After saying hello to Xu Jin, he pushed the door open and went out. Walking on the street in the early morning, Lin Sun soon saw a spiritual shuttle parked in midair. He immediately became interested and went forward to pay 10 copper coins, intending to try the feeling of riding in the spiritual shuttle. When he entered the carriage, it had already been crowded with figures, including practitioners and ordinary people of all kinds, men and women, old and young. There were many seats in the carriage, but they had been occupied. Lin Sun could only stand there and look around curiously. Uncles and aunties were discussing the price of spiritual vegetables and grains. Young boys and girls were excitedly talking about the news that Lu Qinyan, an artistic practitioner, would arrive in Mist City soon. And practitioners were communicating about the registration for the province test that would begin today. It was very lively and noisy. People who liked peace and tranquility could not stand this environment, but Lin Sun liked it very much. Here, one could see many different faces, each with different emotions and stories written behind them. Just like the various states of life, they revealed the unique atmosphere of the mortal world. Whoosh! Soon, the spiritual shuttle started and flew in the air, like a long dragon winding in the void, fast and steady. Suddenly, Lin Sun was attracted by a conversation. I don't know how many powerful figures who have been famous in Southwest Province will participate in the registration for the province test. As far as I know, the 4 most famous geniuses of Mist College, Xu Shaolin, Yuan Jing, Lu Jiao and Yun Zitong, will participate in the province test. They are also praised as the most promising practitioners to reach the top 10 in the province test. Yes, I heard that there are more than 300 students in Mist College participating in the province test this time, more than in previous years. There are many powerful figures among them, but it is not known how many people can pass the examination. Indeed, it is only in Mist College. Looking at the whole Mist City, and all the states and counties in Southwest Province, I don't know how many practitioners are waiting for the arrival of the province test. I heard that the number of practitioners participating in the province test will exceed 5,000. 5,000? Wow. Only 100 people can pass the province test each time. By comparison, only 1 out of 50 practitioners can pass the examination. The competition is too cruel. Yes, this is the province test. Those who can pass are the first-class geniuses in the world. Only such people are qualified to participate in the nation test and compete with the geniuses of other provinces. Ho, the province test is the most eye-catching event every year. I don't know how many dazzling figures will emerge in the province test this time. Lin Sun was a little surprised when he heard this. More than 5,000 practitioners participated in the province test. The competition was too big. Not everyone could participate in the province test. If you wanted to participate, you had to pass the county test first, and then the state test. Finally, you could get the certificate of passing the state test to be qualified to sign up for the province test. After such layers of screening, the practitioners who could participate in the province test were naturally not ordinary people. 5,000 carefully selected Xiozha came together to fight for 100 spots. It could be imagined how cruel the competition was. This reminded Lin Sun of his one-year life in the bloodthirsty camp, where he also faced challenges every day. The losers would be eliminated, and only the winners could stay. Compared with that, the province test was not much worse. However, the competitors were no longer the trainees in the bloodthirsty camp, but the top group of practitioners in the whole southwest province of the empire. As far as Lin Sun knew, there were only 3 criteria for the province test. One must be under the age of 18, be in the human gang realm or above, and have the certificate of passing the state test. Those who couldn't meet any of the above criteria couldn't participate. Under such circumstances, it could be seen how difficult and demanding it was to stand out through the province test. But the more it was like this, the more Lin Sun looked forward to it. He never feared any challenge, not only in the bloodthirsty camp, but also in the future. Only by competing with the truly strong would one be able to know exactly where one was on the path of cultivation. Whining, not long after, the spiritual shuttle stopped, and they arrived at Mist College. Lin soon followed the crowd out of the shuttle. At a glance, he saw an ancient building complex standing in the distance, like silent mountains, covering an extremely vast area. In front of the building complex, there was a circular white jade square, where many figures had already gathered. Most of them were young men and women, and there were some rare handsome men and beautiful women. Under the blue sky and white clouds, they outlined a beautiful scenery. This was Mist College, the school with the longest history and the strongest foundation in the whole southwest province of the empire. Over the past thousands of years, many dazzling geniuses had been born in this college. Some of them became famous all over the world, and some became giant. It was said that even Lu Wujuan, the governor of Southwest Province, and Yao Tuahai, a great practitioner who could keep pace with Lu Wujuan, had once cultivated in Mist College. And the registration place for the province test was arranged in Mist College. Chapter 204. There was still a lot of time before the registration for the province test. Many boys and girls were waiting on the white jade square in front of Mist City School, chatting with each other. It was quite lively. Most of these boys and girls were dressed in brocade clothes. The boys were handsome and the girls were beautiful. Many of them had attendants and servants with them. Needless to say, they were either rich or noble. Of course, there were also some ordinary clothes and poor children, but relatively speaking, the number was much smaller. Most of those who could reach the human gang realm at the age of 10 and pass the state test smoothly were from rich and powerful clans. Children from poor families were destined from birth to have no matter how talented they were in cultivation. If they didn't have enough cultivation resources to support them, it would be difficult for them to achieve anything in cultivation. This was the reality. Decades ago, a highly respected practitioner of Tao Insight Realm in Green Deer School of the Empire once said, "It's hard for a poor family to produce a practitioner," which caused an uproar. Many people criticized the great practitioner's words for being absolutely exaggerated, but only those who really understood the reality of the empire knew that this sentence was not wrong. Although the empire was getting stronger and stronger, most of the cultivation resources of the empire were almost all monopolized by the upper aristocratic forces. Under such circumstances, it was not impossible for poor children to change their fate and soar to the sky, but it was too elusive. There might not even be one among thousands of people. This was the cruel reality pointed out by "It's hard for a poor family to produce a practitioner." Fortunately, the big shots in the upper class of the empire obviously noticed this, so there was a whole set of assessment systems, such as county test, state test, province test, and nation test. The purpose was to select the real outstanding talents from all over the world fairly. Those children from poor families could get rewards from the empire as long as they could perform well in various assessments. If they joined the army, they could get more preferential treatment. In a word, the system of selecting talents in the empire was relatively the fairest and just. For many children from poor families, it was the only chance to change their fate. Lin soon couldn't deeply understand this at present, but the moment he walked into the white jade square, he felt an inexplicable hostility. "Look, here comes another bumpkin. Haha, look at his clothes. There is no spiritual weapon on him. He is still wearing ordinary clothes. How dare such a person come to participate in the province test? What a joke. Don't laugh at him. What if you hurt his sensitive self-esteem? That would make us seem too ungentlemanly. Hey, a bumpkin will always be a bumpkin. He is too naive to think that he can make a great leap through the province test. He doesn't know that almost all the poor children who participated in the province test in the past ended in failure. Guess what happened to these people later? How is it? It's simple. They'll be roped in by those big powers and clans. They'll either become their lackeys or our retainers. It might look impressive, but they'll only be able to work for the clan behind us for the rest of their lives. Once they leave us, they're just phoenixes with their feathers plucked. They're even worse than chickens. Ha! All kinds of sneers and comments sounded one after another. Many people unscrupulously cast their eyes on Lin, as if they saw an ugly duckling suddenly breaking into a flock of swans. Noticing this scene, Lin Sun was stunned. He never thought that he would become a laughingstock for no reason. This was definitely an unexpected calamity. He couldn't help raising his eyes and glancing around. He saw that those who laughed at him were all boys and girls in gorgeous clothes and proud looks. They were at most in their teens, but their words were unscrupulous and showed a sense of superiority. Are these the noble children cultivated by the big clans and forces? Are these the practitioners who are about to participate in the province test? Lin Sun was suspicious. He wouldn't be angry about it, but he felt it ridiculous. Compared with the trainees in the bloodthirsty camp, these boys and girls in front of him were like a group of childish ghosts, arrogant and judging people by their appearance. Lin Sun didn't know that this situation was actually very common. In the eyes of those noble children with extraordinary backgrounds, those poor children born at the bottom were like humble servants, insignificant. The most terrible thing was that this kind of hostile attitude was not an exception, but existed in every region of the empire. For the poor children, in the face of such provocation and contempt, they often dared not to speak out, and could only bear it no matter how much they suffered. Because they knew that offending such a playboy was equivalent to offending a big clan and force, and the consequences were not what they could bear. A bunch of idiot, Lin Sun murmured in his heart. He shook his head, found a quiet place, sat down and closed his eyes to rest. He couldn't fight back, because it was not one person but a group of people who laughed at him and despised him. Did he have to teach these guys a lesson one by one? However, after this incident, Lin Sun was completely clear that although he entered the Xiao Empire, he had never really understood what the world was like. Feiyun village was too remote, Donglin town was too remote, and the bloodthirsty camp was too close. Only now in Mist City did Lin Sun begin to see the real face of the world. Of course, in Lin Sun's heart, these boys and girls didn't represent the whole empire. They were just a microcosm of the secular society of the empire. In other words, this was a group of young people who lived carefree lives and had never experienced true battles. They had lived under the protection of their clans since they were young. Arrogance and conceit were the common problems of this group. Compared with them, people like Shi Yu, Ning Meng, Bai Lingshi, Zhao Yin, and Zhang Sunheng were more like the children of the upper aristocratic families. They had mature and tenacious minds, unconventional first-class means, and extraordinary strength and shrewdness. The children of the upper aristocratic families were the most terrible. In Lin's view, it would be a good thing if all the participants of the province test were such a group of boys and girls. At least they wouldn't be a big threat to him. However, Lin soon found that there were some powerful people in the White Jade Square, and even some practitioners revealed a strong breath, which Lin dared not to underestimate. At this time, a sudden uproar broke out. My God! The eldest young miss of the Wen clan has actually come as well. Who else can it be? Wen Mingxiu, the genius girl of Wen clan in Mist City. It turns out to be her. Didn't they say that she was sent to a mysterious place to practice last year? Yes, I heard that she returned half a year ago, but I didn't expect that she would appear on the first day of registration for the province test. Now it's lively. As far as I know, there are dozens of first-class people who will participate in the province test, including Wen Mingxiu. Lin Sun was a little surprised by the rising and falling voices of discussion. Wen Mingxiu? Could it be her? Lin Sun couldn't help but look up. In the distance, a chariot pulled by 4 white deers slowly stopped, and then a beautiful girl in gorgeous clothes with a proud bearing came out of it. It was Wen Mingxiu, who had been hostile to him in the bloodthirsty camp and was defeated by him with one move. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but show a strange smile. Turned out that this was a famous genius girl in Mist City. If she was a genius girl, what was Bai Lingshi? Lin Sun felt a little strange. A trainee who was eliminated in the quarterly assessment in the bloodthirsty camp suddenly became the object of admiration of many boys and girls in Mist City. This change really made Lin Sun not know whether to laugh or cry. The reason was not that Wen Mingxiu was not strong, but that Lin Sun had been training in the bloodthirsty camp for a year, and he had been in contact with a group of top teenagers in the empire, which made his position far beyond the secular sense. As soon as Wen Mingxiu appeared, it immediately caused a big sensation. Many boys and girls scattered on the white jade square gathered here, including some children of noble families. They all looked at Wen Mingxiu with jealousy, envy, and all kinds of hot love in their eyes. Soon, Wen Mingxiu was surrounded by a lot of people. They surrounded Wen Mingxiu like stars surrounding the moon, which made Wen Mingxiu stand out from the crowd. Wen Mingxiu was obviously used to this. There was a faint smile on her face. She was reserved, calm, proud and elegant, but she was a little impatient in her heart. At this moment, the boys and girls around her might be famous in Mist City, but since Wen Mingxiu saw everything in the bloodthirsty camp, she looked down on these guys. Of course, Wen Mingxiu also knew that there would be many practitioners who were not inferior to her, or even stronger than her, participating in the province test. Unfortunately, she didn't find one along the way. This was normal. It was the first day of registration for the province test, and the real strong couldn't all appear at once. What? Suddenly, Wen Mingxiu inadvertently glanced at a familiar figure in the distance. She couldn't help being shocked and stopped unconsciously. How could it be him? In an instant, a strong sense of shame and hatred surged in Wen Mingxiu's heart. Thinking of what happened in the bloodthirsty camp, the reserved smile at the corner of her mouth became cold. Wen Mingxiu had long been the focus of attention. Seeing her suddenly stop and look to one side, it immediately attracted many people's attention. "Miss Mingxiu, did you see an acquaintance?" Someone next to her couldn't help asking. Others were also curious. Looking at the direction Wen Mingxiu just looked at, there was no figure worthy of attention. Wen Mingxiu withdrew her gaze and thought for a moment. She had a plan in her mind. She smiled slightly. "Nothing. I just didn't expect to see an old friend here." As she spoke, her eyes inadvertently fell on Lin Sun in the distance. This small movement was noticed by many people around her in an instant. All of a sudden, many people looked at Lin Sun in unison. Seeing that he was just a strange teenager in ordinary clothes, many people were stunned. Old friend? When did Wen Mingxiu have such an old friend? At this time, a practitioner seemed to recognize Lin Sun and cried, "No way! Isn't he the country bumpkin just now?" He looked incredulous. After this reminder, many people vaguely remembered that the teenager in the distance seemed to be the guy they had ridiculed just now. But in this way they were stunned. Chapter 205. Wen Mingxiu didn't answer immediately when she saw the puzzled expressions of the people around her. She paced forward for a while, and came to an open area. Then she said, "Why? Do you look down on my old friend?" The people nearby were embarrassed. They were all descendants of extraordinary families, so they naturally looked down on this guy who was obviously born in a poor family. But they couldn't admit it because of Wen Mingxiu. Wen Mingxiu sighed and said, "My friend is more powerful than you think. If I'm not wrong, according to his current fighting capacity, I'm afraid that none of you here can defeat him." Her words immediately caused an uproar among the people nearby. Their faces were full of dissatisfaction. Someone couldn't help retorting, "Miss Mingxiu, do you look down on us?" Wen Mingxiu frowned and said, "When did I say that?" Then she said helplessly, "What I said just now is true. If you don't believe me, I have nothing to say." The more she said like this, the more unconvinced the boys and girls nearby became. How could she say that they couldn't even defeat a poor country bumpkin? This was too hurtful. If someone else dared to say this, they would have already beaten him up. "Humph, I'd like to have a try to see what this guy is capable of. How can he deserve such praise from Miss Mingxiu?" An arrogant young man in a green robe couldn't help jumping out and pointing his spear at Lin Sun in the distance. Yuan Shu, why do you do this? My old friend has a bad temper. It'll be bad if he accidentally hurts you. When Mingxiu persuaded him, as if she couldn't bear to see him suffer. Hearing those words, the man by the name of Yuan Shu felt as if his heart was being pierced by needles. He felt an enormous sense of humiliation. Is I such a loser in your heart, Miss Mingxiu? Yuan Shu looked gloomy. No, don't get me wrong. When Mingxiu smiled bitterly. In that case, don't stop me anymore. Yuan Shu said and strode away. He swore in his heart, Wen Mingxiu, how dare you look down on me? I must prove to you how unbearable your so-called old friend is in front of me. Seeing this, Wen Mingxiu could not help but sigh. The people around her were very excited. Yuan Shu's action was exactly what they wanted. Wen Mingxiu's flattery of that country bumpkin made them very unhappy. Their every move was seen by many practitioners on the White Jade Square. Seeing Yuan Shu suddenly rush out aggressively, it immediately attracted many people's attention. From the looks of it, Yuan Shu, that little devil, is going to beat someone up again. Tut-tut, I don't know who provoked him. He even planned to fight in front of Mist College. Now there will be a good show to watch. Brother, is this Yuan Shu very powerful? Humph, you are not a practitioner of Mist City. You don't even know Yuan Shu. He comes from the Yuan family, one of the 4 first-class forces in Mist City. He was born with great strength and extraordinary talent. Although he is only 15 years old now, he has been immersed in the human gang realm for 3 years. So, he was promoted to human gang realm at the age of 12? Amazing! Amidst all kinds of discussions, Yuan Shu came to Lin Sun, crossed his arms over his chest and said proudly, My friend, I heard that you are very powerful. Why don't we have a fight? In fact, Lin Sun had already noticed all this, but he didn't expect that someone would jump out to make trouble for him just after Wen Mingxiu appeared. This made him speechless. Were the young people so impatient nowadays? Brother, did Wen Mingxiu ask you to come here? Lin Sun decided to patiently persuade this grumpy and arrogant young man. Today, he came to sign up for the province test. How could he be in the mood to fight with Yuan Shu? No. Yuan Shu flatly denied. Yuan Shu denied it flatly. What a joke. He was the dignified young master Yuan Shu. How could others order him around? I see. You must admire Wen Mingxiu, so you want to take this opportunity to win the beauty's appreciation and favor, right? Lin Sun asked with a kind face. Coupled with his warm smile, he looked harmless to both humans and animals. Unfortunately, Yuan Shu didn't appreciate it. He scolded impatiently, Don't talk nonsense. I just want to know if you dare to accept the challenge. If you don't have the ability, just admit defeat. Don't waste my time. Brother, don't be so grumpy. I suspect that you may be used as a spear. Think about it, if you are defeated by me, who will be the disgrace? Lin Sun tried to restrain himself and try to make his attitude more sincere. However, as soon as Lin Sun said this, Yuan Shu flew into a rage. Damn it, do you also think I'm not your opponent? You've gone too far. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes at once. This sentence was intriguing. Didn't it mean that someone had thought that Yuan Shu was not his opponent long ago? Who could it be? There was no need to guess. It must be Wen Mingxiu. Boom. Before Lin Sun could say anything more, Yuan Shu had already made his move directly. He took a wrong step and exerted strength in his arms. Suddenly, a dazzling emerald halo condensed in his palm, and he slapped it at Lin Sun fiercely. The air suddenly became chaotic, and the terrible palm wind was like a landslide and a tsunami, with fierce power. This was the power of human gang realm. The spiritual power contained the strongest gang chi, which could hurt people across the air. Its power was so strong that practitioners of martial realm could not resist it at all. Green Star Wave Destroying Palm. In the distance, many practitioners' eyes lit up and they exclaimed. This was the unique skill of Yuan family. With one palm, stars rose from the blue sea and waves destroyed the sky. Obviously, Yuan Shu had been immersed in this palm skill for many years. With just one strike, there was a kind of terrifying momentum like the blue sea surging and destroying dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. This guy is not bad. In the distance, when Mingxiu's eyes lit up, Yuan Shu's performance at the moment surprised her. The people around her were also excited and looking forward to it. Although Yuan Shu was not the most powerful among them, he could be regarded as first class. As soon as he made his move, he used the green star wave destroying palm. Obviously, he intended to defeat the enemy with one move and completely establish his prestige. This idiot doesn't know that he is being used by others. What a waste of my advice. Lin Sun cursed in his heart, but his movements were not slow. At the moment when Yuan Shu made his move, Lin Sun also made a sudden attack. Boom! With a casual punch, the surface of his fist was filled with a wisp of illusory cyan spiritual light, ethereal and seemingly powerless. Seeing this, many people couldn't help but sneer. What the hell was this punching skill? It was so light as if he hadn't eaten. But the next moment, many people's faces changed. With a bang, the two fists collided, producing a terrible explosion. The gang qi turned into a turbulent flow and swept around. Almost at the same time, Yuan Shu, who had an unparalleled momentum in the eyes of the crowd, was like a small boat that had been slapped by a tsunami. His body was sent flying backward for more than 100 feet before he fell to the ground with a thud and let out a shrill scream. He couldn't resist one move and was completely knocked away. All of this occurred in an instant, and it was inconceivably swift. No one had imagined that the dignified Yuan clan's eldest young master, an outstanding genius that was born with extraordinary strength, would not only be unable to defeat his opponent with a single move, he'd instead been defeated with a single move. The whole place was dead silent. Many people were dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. When Mingxiu was shocked in her heart, and her expression changed. This guy had become so powerful now. Did he pass the final assessment of Bloodthirsty Camp and enter Gang-Producing Lake? Lin Sun stood still and looked a little stunned. Since he reached the human gang realm, he had never fought with anyone. So he just made a tentative attack and didn't use much strength. But who would have thought that he would be able to defeat Yuan Shu with such a casual strike? Isn't this guy a little too weak? Are all the practitioners participating in the province test so weak? Lin Sun was suspicious. He didn't know that it was not because Yuan Shu was weak, but because he was too strong. Again. With a roar, Yuan Shu got up and rushed out again with a face full of anger. Obviously, he couldn't accept what had happened just now. He thought he was too careless, so he used all his strength at this moment. Boom! After another head-on collision, Yuan Shu was knocked away again like a kite with a broken string. Before he landed, he had coughed up blood and screamed. The whole place was in an uproar, and the sound of people gasping could be heard one after another. Many people in the field knew Yuan Shu's strength. He was born with divine strength and extraordinary talent. The blue star wave-destroying palm he practiced was also a first-class martial art. In the human gang realm, he could be regarded as a first-class strongman. But under such circumstances, Yuan Shu was knocked away twice in a row, and he didn't even have time to resist, which was too shocking. Compared with Yuan Shu, how strong was the teenager's combat effectiveness? Alas, I told you that my old friend is very strong, but Yuan Shu didn't listen to my advice. Now he is defeated in public. Why bother? In the distance, when Mingxiu sighed faintly, the young boys and girls next to her all looked gloomy. Yuan Shu's defeat shocked and disappointed them. Hearing Wen Mingxiu's words at this moment, it was like slapping them in the face, which made them extremely aggrieved. I'm going to learn from my friend's skills. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from Wen Mingxiu's side and rushed towards Lin Sun like lightning. It was a young man in a silver robe, holding a silver spear in his hand. His clothes were overflowing with spiritual light. Obviously, he was wearing spiritual equipment. As soon as he appeared, he caused countless exclamations. Qi Yunxiao, the young master of Azure Light Pavilion. He also made a move. Now there will be a good show. In our Mist City, although Qi Yunxiao is not the top practitioner of Human Gang Realm, he is a young hero who knows how to fight best. I heard that last year, he killed a real voodoo barbarian tribe alone. Just look at Qi Yunxiao's spiritual equipment. That young man is not comparable to him. Lin Sun couldn't help frowning when he saw that he had just defeated one. Didn't he show enough strength just now? Or did he have enough confidence to deal with him? Chapter 206. Today was the registration day for the province test. Although it was not the registration time yet, many practitioners had already gathered on a white jade square outside Mist College. When the battle broke out, it immediately caused a sensation and attracted the attention of all the people present. No one expected that someone would fight here at such a moment. When they saw Yuan Shu, the young master of Yuan family, was crushed to the ground without any resistance, it caused a great shock and an uproar. Many people were speculating who the young man who defeated Yuan Shu was and why his fighting capacity was so strong. But at this moment Qi Yunxiao, dressed in a silver robe and holding a silver spear, made a brazen attack. It was really eye-catching. Whoosh! Qi Yunxiao was surrounded by a dazzling spirit light. He held a silver spear in his hand and exuded a threatening aura. He didn't talk nonsense at all. With a jerk of his wrist, the silver spear shot out brilliant light like a rainstorm, piercing the sky and violently attacking Lin Sun. Bursting shadow spear, silver flower of fire. At this moment, thousands of spear shadows covered the void, and the silver light bloomed like fireworks, beautiful with endless killing intent. Many people couldn't help marveling that Qi Yunxiao's attack showed the style of a first-class practitioner of Human Gang Realm. What was rare was that Qi Yunxiao was only 16 years old this year. It was amazing that he could have such achievements on the road of cultivation at such a young age. Boom! But at the same time, Lin Sun also moved. He didn't dodge or evade. His elegant figure rushed forward, and just like before, he punched out with a simple and direct punch. But at this moment, Lin Sun had taken action. The windstorm millstone in his body suddenly ran, and the terrifying and pure gang power boiled to the extreme like a burning sea of fire. On the other hand, a wisp of a clear and illusory azure-colored halo that seemed like glass appeared on his fist, and his imposing aura was ethereal, heavy, and indomitable. With a punch, the spear shadows all over the sky suddenly burst into pieces. The remaining momentum of the punch was unstoppable. It destroyed thousands of silver spear shadows one after another and crushed all the way to Qi Yunxiao. It could be clearly seen that the void was crushed by the power of this punch, and the shrill sound was deafening like a tsunami. Everyone was shocked and their minds were shaken. What kind of fist technique was this? Such powerful strength! Qi Yunxiao's face suddenly changed. His figure suddenly flashed in the void, avoiding the fist wind. At the same time, his silver spear shook, and with a loud roar, he attacked again. Exploding shadow spear technique, prairie burning strike. Rumble! The silver spear was simply like a silver pillar of light that flew over from the heavens, and it smashed down with an extremely murderous and terrifying aura. Boom! Lin Sun stamped on the ground and rushed up. This time, he stretched out his hand and fiercely grabbed the silver spear. The air was torn apart like a piece of cloth. An illusory azure hand covered the sky like a dragon's claw that stretched out from the depths of the clouds. It instantly grabbed the opponent's silver spear and shook it violently. Rumble! Qi Yunxiao only felt a violent, ocean-like power pouring into his body along the silver spear, shaking his whole body. Boundless pain attacked his body, and he could not help but cough up blood, screaming in pain. His body was forcibly pressed from the air to the ground. With a puff, smoke and dust splashed. His body fell to the ground, and his bones were almost broken. His face was distorted. Exclamations were heard all around, and many people gasped. This blow was too fierce. Qi Yunxiao was suppressed by only a pair of palms. In the distance, Wen Mingxiu couldn't help but change her face, and her heart palpitated. Lin Sun's fighting capacity was completely beyond her expectation. She couldn't imagine how powerful Lin Sun's fighting capacity had become after a year of training in the bloodthirsty camp. Beside Wen Mingxiu, the faces of those boys and girls also changed. They were full of shock, confusion, doubt, and horror. Before, Yuan Shu's fiasco had made them realize Lin Sun's strength. They thought that Qi Yunxiao could save some face by taking action. Unexpectedly, Qi Yunxiao was also suppressed to the ground with just 2 punches. This was too horrible. Damn it! Qi Yunxiao roared and struggled to get up. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he was beaten to the ground with only 2 moves. The strong sense of shame stimulated him to the point of going crazy. As the young master of Azure Light Pavilion, Qi Yunxiao was also a well-known genius in Mist City. When had he ever suffered such a big loss? But before he got up, he heard a bang. Lin Sun's foot had already stepped on him, making his face come into close contact with the ground. His nose was full of dust. "You're courting death!" Qi Yunxiao roared, and his face was distorted. In the distance, many boys and girls who had a good relationship with Qi Yunxiao were also furious. This guy was too arrogant and deserved to be killed. Just now you ran out to ask for a fight. Now you lost and you still clamored to threaten others. Is this how your parents taught you? Rubbish! Lin Sun looked contemptuous. How dare you swear? A girl in the distance screamed. Lin Sun raised his head, looked at the girl in the distance, and suddenly smiled. Sorry, you may have misunderstood. I'm not targeting him alone, but all of you. As he spoke, he glanced at the people around Wen Mingxiu. After a pause, he gently spat out a word from his lips. All of you are rubbish. The practitioners on the White Jade Plaza, who had been paying attention to all of this, were instantly dumbfounded when they heard this. This guy was so arrogant that he scolded Wen Mingxiu and all the others in one sentence. Wasn't he worried about being retaliated against? Wen Mingxiu and others were also stunned. They almost couldn't believe their ears. This guy actually said they were all rubbish? Many people were so angry that their faces turned livid and they trembled all over. Arrogant. Simply too arrogant. But before they could react, Lin Sun unceremoniously kicked Qi Yunxiao away from the ground and strode towards Wen Mingxiu in the distance. His figure was straight, his eyebrows were as sharp as a knife, and his eyes were like lightning. Although he was wearing ordinary clothes, at this moment, in the eyes of all the people present, there was a compelling momentum of disdain. Lin Sun had proved his terrible fighting capacity by defeating the 2 young overmatches, Yuan Shu and Qi Yunxiao. At this moment, seeing that he seemed to want to continue, many people couldn't help but be shocked when they saw him walking towards Wen Mingxiu and others. Did he want to continue fighting? What are you going to do? Damn it, this guy is going too far. He doesn't put us in his eyes at all. Beside Wen Mingxiu there was a sharp rebuke. Although the voice was loud, it seemed to be lacking in confidence. Lin Sun didn't look sideways, as if he didn't feel anything. His attitude of ignoring everything made those arrogant and conceited boys and girls angry with uncertain expressions. Finally, Lin Sun stopped 3 meters away from Wen Mingxiu. His deep eyes fell on Wen Mingxiu's pale face, which had already become slightly panicked. He said, I can let go of the past things. After all, you and I used to be classmates, and there was no real hatred between us. But after what happened today, I suddenly want to ask you seriously, do you really want to choose to be my enemy? His voice was flat, without any fluctuation. All the disasters today seemed to happen inexplicably, but Lin soon knew that all these were inseparable from Wen Mingxiu's instigation. Originally, he didn't have any hostility towards this woman, but now he had to face up to this problem. Seeing that Lin soon pointed the spearhead at Wen Mingxiu, people nearby couldn't help but be shocked and couldn't guess the relationship between them. Used to be classmates? But it sounded like a pair of enemies, full of the feeling of mutual hostility. This relationship was too unusual. At this moment, when Mingxiu's expression changed sharply, and her chest rose and fell. She remembered the shame of being defeated by Lin Sun in the bloodthirsty camp, and the scene of Yuan Shu and Qi Yunxiao being defeated by Lin Sun just now. This made her very sure that even if she fought against Lin Sun, she couldn't be Lin Sun's opponent at all, not now, and probably not in the future. Many people present might not know how powerful Lin Sun was, but Wen Mingxiu knew it clearly. A trainee who could survive in the bloodthirsty camp without being eliminated was not comparable to ordinary strong people at all. But it was absolutely impossible for Wen Mingxiu to admit defeat like this. Mist City was her territory, and there were so many practitioners present. As a direct descendant of Wen clan and a famous genius girl in Mist City, how could she lower her head like this? Think about it. I've always been patient. Lin Sun seemed to see through Wen Mingxiu's thoughts and said, however, if I find that you decide to be my enemy in the future, I may not hold back as I did today. How dare you? How dare you threaten Miss Mingxiu? You're courting death. Many boys and girls cursed angrily. Lin Sun ignored them all. After saying this, he left on his own. From beginning to end, no one dared to stop him. This was the power. After defeating Yuan Shu and Qi Yunxiao, anyone who wanted to be Lin Sun's enemy now had to consider whether he was qualified or not. Wen Mingxiu didn't say a word. Her mind was in a mess, full of emotions of anxiety, anger, humiliation, and fear. Should she borrow the power of the clan to kill Lin Sun? As soon as this idea flashed through Wen Mingxiu's mind, it was immediately denied. Strictly speaking, Lin Sun was a real trainee from the bloodthirsty camp. If he was killed, how could the drill masters of the bloodthirsty camp agree? What made Wen Mingxiu most troubled was that she knew very well that if she couldn't kill Lin Sun, he would definitely become a nightmare for Wen clan in the future with his terrible potential in the bloodthirsty camp. Miss Mingxiu, don't worry. Let him be rampant for now. When we leave Mist College, I'll find someone to deal with him. A young man patted his chest and promised to do it. Yes, Mist City is our territory. How can we allow a bastard who comes out of nowhere to be so arrogant? Now it's under the watchful eyes of many practitioners. It's not convenient to take action. I'll deal with him later. Damn it, when did a bumpkin dare to ride on our heads? Other boys and girls also spoke, gnashing their teeth. Wen Mingxiu felt a deep disgust in her heart. These guys were scared out of their wits just now, but now they were so arrogant. Perhaps compared with other practitioners, they had the ability to be proud and conceited. But compared with Lin Sun, they were indeed a group of useless garbage. P.S. The power was cut off at home. This chapter was written in the internet cafe, so the second chapter may be a little late. Next, announce the WeChat official account. Open WeChat, search for the official account, Xiao Jinyu or Xiaojinyu 233, add your followers, and then check the history to see all the articles of Rune Emperor.